Plan Commission special meeting to order for Wednesday, February 21st, 2024 at 2 o'clock p.m. Item number 2 is roll call. Starting on my right, please.
Wiesinger here.
Gabriel here.
Janzak here.
Baker.
Doogie here.
Jamadi.
Cowell.
Also present are support specialist Taylor Ochinsky and town attorney Nick Flanagan. Item number 3 is to certify the posting of the meeting.
I certify that on Friday, February 16th, 2024, the agenda for the Town of Rome Plan Commission meeting for Wednesday, February 21st, 2024 was posted at the Rome Town Hall at 1:15 p.m., posted at Quick Trip LLC at 1:18 p.m., posted at Nakusa Port Edward State Bank at 1:23 p.m., and emailed to the Wisconsin Rapids Tribune at 5:45 p.m.
Thank you. Item number 4 is to approve the agenda. Motion.
Motion to approve as presented.
Seconded.
Motion by Jerry, seconded by Paul to approve the agenda. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, then all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Number 5 is the citizen comment portion of the agenda. Is there any cards, Taylor, for anybody that wants to speak on something that's not on the agenda?
There was no cards received.
Okay. Being that this is not a public hearing, typically it's going to just be up to the commission to speak. But if somebody in the audience would have something that has not been discussed already, then we would like to hear your comments. But we've heard quite a bit. We've got quite a few emails, letters with the neighbors' concerns. So the next section is the commission will also take comment from the public on agenda items as called by the chair, but not during citizen comment. Please note that once the commission begins discussion on an agenda item, no further comment will also be allowed from the public on that issue. Item number 6, discussion of possible referral to future agenda. Tim Schwecke, Civitech Consulting, regarding zoning code audit / update process and timeline.
I think he's there. Can you hear us?
I can.
It's all yours.
Hi, Tim.
Okay. Well, good. It's good to see you again on a wonderful spring day. Just wanted to take a couple minutes to give you a little, description of the code audit that Civitech is going to be working on, kind of talking about, some of the major points, talk about the timeline. And ultimately, what we're going to be doing is working on a report for your review and consideration. But if you think of the code audit, something like going to the doctor, right? You go in for an annual, checkup, or you're not feeling well, and you tell the doctor kind of what's going on, and he's gonna, if he's a good doctor, he's gonna be, asking a lot of questions. He's gonna be, taking tests and looking at the results, comparing those results to averages and best practices. And then he or she's going to come back with a set of recommendations and findings saying, well, this is what I found out. So that's essentially what we're going to be doing, except we're going to be looking at your existing zoning code. And the intent is to not identify each and every point of the zoning code that might need to be, changed or tweaked, but to kind of look at some of the high-level issues on how the code handles certain aspects of growth and development, and come back with a set of recommendations and findings so that you can, at a future date, think about how you potentially want to, tackle your zoning code. Whether it's simply, making some tweaks here and there, or if you're looking at, perhaps a code rewrite. Some of the things that we're going to be looking at, again, are essentially how does your current code stack up to some recent court decisions relative to signage, relative to different kind of land uses. We'll also look at again how your code stacks up against state statutes because they're always changing. It's kind of surprising how often the state legislature tweaks the basic foundation for, zoning within the state, whether it be a city, town, or village. We'll also be looking at your comprehensive plan to make sure that, the vision that's kind of articulated in the comp plan is actually carried forward in your zoning code. I understand also you're kind of working on, perhaps doing some more detailed look at your town center. So again, when that gets a little bit further along, we'll be able to identify potentially things that need to be, again, amended or changed in your zoning code to accomplish that larger picture. Some of the things that we also look at are, perhaps ways of, or opportunities to streamline your development and review process, making it a little bit easier, potentially for planning commission, for staff, and especially for, property owners and developers. Streamlining is always a good thing. We also look at the number of land uses that are in your code. And, just by way of example, I think there's like 350 different land uses. And sometimes those land uses have different terms and definitions applied to them. So we'll definitely, look at that and come back with a set of recommendations. Because ideally, the average amount of land uses within the zoning code is about 115, 130, and you've got 3 times that many. So that's one thing we'll be looking to, again, is to kind of simplify, the zoning code, making it easier for everybody that has to use it. We also want to make sure that the end product is user-friendly, it's clear, and everybody understands what the rules and regulations are. So again, we're going to be preparing a report, probably 15 to 18 pages, high-level points of discussion, and then there might be some fine points for revisions, but essentially, again, it's going to be a playbook in terms of you understanding, how your code stacks up against, perhaps best practices, or again, relative to court cases and state statutes. And from that, you can decide how you want to tackle, those revisions that might be needed. It might be helpful for you in budgeting, code work in the future, or, simply deciding if you want to, make amendments, piecemeal or as part of an overall, code amendment. So that's essentially what we're going to be doing. Again, is the zoning code audit. In terms of timeline, I think we're looking at, and this has to be firmed up, but in terms of presentation to the Plan Commission, potentially to the town board, I think we're looking at April or May, depending on the availability for, agendas. Obviously we want to give you enough time to have the report in advance, but then also, that's probably a meeting that I will be attending in person, so that we can, open up a more formal dialogue in terms of what the report, is recommending, and kind of getting some of your feedback and answering your questions. So that's kind of what we're up to. We're going to be working on over the next couple of months here. Just wondering if there's any comments, questions about what we're actually working on.
I think there is, Tim, if you will just stand by for a second. Lori?
Hi, Tim. This is Lori. We've spoke several times. I have a question now that we've gotten through Zoning Hub, and we had a soft launch this week, in fact, hard launch in a couple of weeks here. Can you tell me, you originally quoted to us, the town board, the reboot approximate estimate on that between 16 and 29, and I know you can't give us any hard costs right now, but do you have a better outlook? Are you still thinking that a reboot might be okay, or a full rewrite now that you know what we have in Zoning Hub? You think, because your last comment in there that overall a reboot might be the most likely outcome based on what you saw so far, are you you think a reboot would still be suitable for us? And then what do you think the cost, would that cost estimate still be 16 to 29,000 for a budgetary item for us?
Yeah, I think, you know, again, given the number of land uses, you know, that has to be pared down.
Right,
So that's a fair amount of work, so, you know, again, without having.
I know, it's an
completed the
estimate.
audit, you know, my gut instinct is it's gonna be at the upper end.
okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions from any of the commissioners regarding Tim's presentation? Okay. I think that's all we have for you at the moment, Tim.
Okay, that's great. So, you know, obviously I'll be working on this and I'll be working with, you know, the town attorney and staff and, obviously there's gonna be a lot of questions and communications back and forth. So, next time you see me, we'll be in person. And then again, I think that's gonna be April, May, depending on schedule.
We have another question for you, Tim.
Hi,
Sure.
I was wondering what, with the 360 land use, or 50 that we have, do you do a consolidation to pare it down to that, what you consider to be normal, 150? Or 150, huh?
All right, so,
Oh, I gotta clean my ears, I guess.
so you have just for example, you've got a lot of land uses that are very specific, different kinds of retail, you know, and I just don't have it off the top of my memory here, but you've got, again, just many kinds of examples of retail. So we would just simply collapse those into one category and just, you know, refer to it as retail. So we don't care if they're selling widgets or stationery or books or fruit or clothes, it really doesn't matter. Retail's retail, so that's an example of where we would kind of, you know, create a larger umbrella and get rid of those fine-grained details.
Tim, when would you expect to start this process?
So I mean, we've already, you know, internally, have started. Again, it's just going back and forth with staff with comments, questions. We will prepare a draft report, that will be submitted for staff, prior to the final report being, you know, finalized, so that, you know, again, the report that you see is gonna be vetted by the staff and be totally complete.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Tim?
I have one more question. Do you do any benchmarking against similar municipalities of the same size in rural areas like we are, that rely on, outdoors and pleasure, so to speak?
Yeah, you know, obviously there are some, you know, best practices. You know, obviously we want to, you know, compare your code to, you know, those best practices and the peers. You know, similarly situated towns like yourself. So yeah, you know, obviously what we want to do is for you to have a code that meets your needs and that's right-sized and it doesn't go too far in terms of, you know, regulations. So that's kind of the end goal is to, you know, have you have a custom tailored zoning code that meets your needs.
Thank you. Any other questions, commissioners? Okay, well then, Tim, I see no other questions. We thank you for your time today and hopefully everything goes well when you continue with this process.
Sounds good?
Thank you very much, Tim.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Are we gonna reject that call? Item number 7, discussion of possible action, consideration of the issuance of a conditional use permit for the following purpose. Allow for a campground at the property located on Archer Lane, owned by Barnum Bay Beach and Marina LLC, also described as Lot 1, CSM 4670, located in governmental lot 2 of section 28, town 20 north, range 5 east, town of Rome, Adams County, Wisconsin, parcel number 30-408-15.
Mr. Chairman, were we gonna have any more discussion on the prior, presentation at all? Or are we gonna wait until the actual presentation? The reason, and he had made a comment about retail is retail and paring it down. And in just going through the commercial A sub-district in the Rome Town Center, we have retail, and then we also have, and that would be that would be a permitted use. But then we did break it down, and I know when we had the discussion as far as the conditional and the permitted uses, that a convenience store has to be a permitted use. Is that retail? Or is a conditional use? Is that retail? Hardware store we have as a conditional use. Is that retail? Grocery store. So when he says that we compared our 360 down to 115, there was a reason why we determined that something would be a permitted use as opposed to a conditional use, even though they might all be lumped under a retail parameter. And I guess that's my only comment.
Okay. I'm sure that's something that's gonna be looked at and worked on, and as they progress through this process of, looking at all the zoning issues.
Okay.
Do we wanna start with Mark, is it? You wanna step up?
Sure. Happy to step up.
You just wanna turn the mic on?
It's red.
Yep, you're good then.
We know that you had a meeting with the homeowners in the area on Monday.
Yeah.
Do you wanna start with there and
Just kind of with how that conversation went.
certainly?
Yeah.
Give us an
Do-
idea.
Do you mind if I pull up the
Oh,
summary?
you
email
do,
that I
do
sent
whatever you
Taylor?
need to do.
Okay. All right, so I met with Andy Platts Monday in Madison, and we talked for about an hour about our plan, what he talked about with some of the neighbors, and I had sent Taylor a summary of kind of what I took away from that. He said, you know, overall he was pleased that we'd been able to get a copy of the redacted letters. Dan and I have looked through them. I read everything cover to cover on those. He wanted to talk about a couple of the continued concerns that he had, or things that he wanted to make sure wouldn't be an issue as we went forward. He had concern about the campground, parked cars, etc. within that parcel and being able to see them from outside. You know, I said our goal was going to be to keep the wooded perimeter, I mean, really as many trees as we can in the entire parcel in place, but especially along the perimeter in the setbacks, we don't plan on disturbing that at all. If anything, I know it was in the possible conditions that were emailed out earlier, you know, adding in additional landscaping to thicken that and minimize any view inside that he was hoping for. He said that there was, let's see, just concern about the green space, you know, that a lot of people really wanted to just keep it unbuilt, undeveloped, but we understood that, you know, that's not a viable business plan for us. He was concerned about what we would be doing to screen in looking inside. He didn't love the idea of a fence. A fence would make it easier than, it would make it less likely that people would wander off the property into backyards, but he thought it might be unsightly, and so he preferred trees or a berm or something. And he was very concerned and said the HOA members were concerned about fires, campfires, wildfire risk. I hadn't put a ton of thought into the fire piece yet, but we had not expected it to just be free reign with people having fires on the ground. I mean, obviously, if we even allow them, it would be within a fire ring specified size, anything like that. The suggestion here of enclosed fire pit, maximum diameter of 36 inches, I mean, I think that sounds fine, if we even allow. There's many months of the year where it's too dry and we wouldn't permit it anyway. There was concern about quiet hours. He didn't want to be up at 2 a.m. with noise. We don't want that for anyone either. And so we assumed there would be quiet hours. We'd said, maybe 11 to 7, 11p to 7a. This said 10p to 7a. I mean, we're very close on that with what I thought he thought. There was a question about security, both in, how are we going to monitor who's there, and how are we going to prevent them from coming off the property onto their property. To one extent, I don't expect it to be an issue because that land has already been there, the bar, the restaurant has already been there. We've already had, hundreds of people very close to where we're talking about, and he couldn't remember a time where people have been wandering from ours into their yard. He said sometimes ATVs or snowmobiles will do that, kind of skirt the yards, but he said that's already been happening. If anything, I think that would happen less once this is built, so that there's less places to cross through inside the area that we're hoping to improve on. Related to security, he wanted to know what we thought about security cameras or things like that. As I'd said at the last meeting, I'm very open to it. I think it'd be easy to tie that into our existing security system that we have already for the restaurant, and it felt like a pretty non-issue in terms of what he and I had discussed for that. Retail sales, he wanted to know, what we planned on selling on site, and I said, we don't have a clear plan at this point. Really it would be a camp store, if anything, selling t-shirts, toothbrushes, things for the campsites and for the RVs. If we needed to, we could always sell that out of the restaurant, but it just felt more convenient to have it available to sell over there. So nothing huge there. Traffic, he said he did assume that this would bring more cars to the location than currently are coming, but he realized it probably would be a small portion compared to what already comes on a busy sunny summer day. So if anything, he was wondering if there would be anything to decrease speeding or traffic on the access road. And I felt that could be something that we could discuss later, us and him, or if that was part of the conditions. Number 2, I mentioned that he was concerned about the ATVs and snowmobiles and not always obeying traffic signals and speed limits. That's already been the case, so we can post signs about it if needed or anything like that, but that didn't seem like anything would change or get worse with this request. Light pollution, he wanted us to have lights on the property. He would prefer that we have more like path height or low lighting rather than high post lighting to minimize light pollution and minimize what they will see from their neighboring homes. I assumed we would have a mix of some low lighting, some high lighting, as we see what the everything looks like with the trees that we're able to keep and how dark or light it already is. Any light that we have, we'd also think about having it able to be dimmed on a timer at night so that it would be less bright at 2 a.m. than 10 p.m. We talked about the road, the driveway through the area. There was some neighbors that said they think it should be entirely paved. There are some that are really just worried about gravel getting onto the main road. He felt it would make the most sense to just do the last X number of feet, 20 feet, 50 feet of the driveway turning into blacktop of some sort before getting to the main road. He understood that we're trying to minimize impermeable surfaces within the space. The DNR, the county wants us to have as much kind of normal soil and gravel more than paved road that we can. And so just having something to allow a moment for cars to kick off the gravel before they get to the main road felt sufficient, as we talked. Ingress and egress, we talked about, that he agreed and thought it was a good idea to have a second access point for EMS vehicles to get in. As we've got our plan, we're looking at kind of the eastern edge of the property is where we would add that. Usually chained off or roped off so that it's not frequently used, but so that it's there for emergencies. The density we talked about, and he was hoping that we would decrease the density, or that you would require the density decreased from what we have proposed, 35 sites. He said he understood it needs to remain economically viable for us if this would be approved. There were a couple specific sites where he felt decreasing the density in a couple spots on the map would make a big difference for kind of the neighbors and the view and noise. So we talked about that, and I said, you know, I was certain that would be a topic that was discussed today. And I think that was primarily what we talked about. We didn't go into some of the concerns that have been raised in the letters about how this may affect property values or resale value or the neighborhood feel. Just that our goal was to have this not be a bother to them once it was completed, and we would work to be good neighbors. He asked a little bit about, you know, more about the forest cover and what we put in terms of ground cover or barriers, and I said that was out of my expertise, but it would be something that, you know, a landscape architect or whoever would be helping install that would help with, and, you know, at the discretion of what you guys recommended
Sure.
for us. Yeah, and that was really how the conversation went. I thought it was a good conversation. I took away his concerns, and I think he heard some reassurances from me that this isn't going to be an eyesore or a loud party central problem. I think they will notice it less than they notice the restaurants already there.
Okay. Okay. We can start anywhere.
Can we ask questions?
You
of
bet you
Mark?
can. Yep.
Okay, when we talk about the reduction of sites, which
Yes.
I had actually brought up at our public hearing.
Yes.
Have you given some thought as to what the potential is for reducing the site numbers after your conversation with the homeowners in the area, that it wouldn't affect the overall feasibility and the
Yeah.
profitability of the sites? Because I had done, using Lake Arrowhead as a campground that's in a residential area,
Yep.
in a commercial spot. They have 10 acres with 44 sites, which it works out to about 0.23 acres per site, which gives them about 43 feet per site, campsite. So working within that map, what I figured out is that 6 acres, if you could pare it down to about 30 sites, have you given any thought as to what you could do to pare down?
We've given some, yeah.
Well, what are you looking at as a number if you pared it down?
Yeah, I mean, I think 30 would be very doable. I was kind of looking in the 28 to 30.
Okay, 28?
I
Does
don't
that
want to
give
say
it-
it because I don't want to.
Well,
go
no,
for
but
less,
28 was actually,
Right.
30, I rounded it up for
Yeah.
you, but 28 was actually kind of where I came out.
Yeah,
So,
and so if we settled somewhere there.
27 to 28
Let's-
sites.
I didn't say
okay.
27.
Okay,
If-
well,
no,
28 to 30,
if-
all right, 30 is
If
a
we
nice,
decreased there, and then I think I would have no issue with that. We could make that work. That would be viable with the project.
it would give you about 43 to 45 feet per site. That'd also allow for some buffers in between your sites.
Yeah, and I,
Very similar to Lake Camelot, and buffers between the roadways to the home.
yes.
And it
Yes.
also allows you, area for your bathhouse and your other areas, working within that same square footage, I'm not you know, I
Yeah.
didn't go out and measure, I'm.
Nope, I don't expect you to have measured,
I
but
use Google Earth and
I understand what you're saying.
rulers and everything else, so, yeah,
Yeah.
so.
So I think that that would be reasonable. The question, I think one step past that is, you know, if we were looking which sites would be removed, you know, are we taking every fifth or are we taking specific area? I think there's pros and cons to either way that we would do that.
Just giving us a starting point, so.
I hear you. When I spoke with Andy, he was hoping that we would reduce the density specifically to the sites that are on your map,
Closest to the,
to the upper left.
right, which is in the viewing area.
Yeah, it's,
No, that's fine.
it'd be, he wanted these
So aren't the
sites.
homes over here?
Well, there's some here and there's some here.
Oh,
And
we
so,
can't-
I know. And
Can you,
so-
would you mind if you just
Yeah, oh,
hold
yeah,
up a
help to
map and point so the
everybody,
rest
yeah.
of us can see it?
Sure. Yeah, you wanna? I have it here.
Well, he's worried that there's some over here and there were some
Right.
over here, but there's like, if you drove out there and looked at it, there's 2 condos over here with trees, and then there's like a driveway with trailers in it, so I guess I'm confused.
Alright, so here's a bigger,
Sure.
That would be helpful, yeah.
and so
Oh, sorry.
I'll just kind of put this way so you can see it.
I either need my bifocals or a binocular.
I won't, so on this map, the question was if we would decrease the density with these units up here.
Okay.
Now, those are to the north.
These are to the north side closest to this,
Yeah, and the lures
Homeowners
over
area.
here,
and then the ones that are down here, he didn't,
cause there's like another driveway with trailers, and then there were like 2 condo units
Yeah.
over there.
yes, so
Yeah.
there's some down that way too. So the question was if we should decrease anything kind of along this corner. Oh,
I'll hold it, you can point.
Yeah, so
Way to go, Vanna.
if we want, you're braver than me to say that.
Oh.
If we wanna decrease anything down here, sorry I'm in your way, or along this side. He didn't think this was a problem or this was a problem, because those are both not towards
Alright, they're on the
people.
road and,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, I mean, that's maybe beyond the scope of what you're talking about right now, just in
No.
terms of conditions,
We'd have
but,
to look at it, yeah, and
Yeah.
see, but,
but that's what he was wondering, you know, do we decrease some of this? Do we turn any of these and say these are not, you know, some of these are not, an RV pad, instead they're going to be just a parking space, you know, we keep the pad there, do we just put nothing there? You know, I think that's the question, and then same thing down here. We may actually lose at least one of these along this bottom edge for the access road, as we kind of have talked about, you know, how would that fit here? What would the fire department prefer to have the best
You think-
angle,
yeah, you'd think the access road would be right where the road is coming in.
like here?
Yeah, that would make the most sense to me.
It
Wouldn't that make the most sense?
That's a,
Yeah,
that's a thought that I had last time, is to do that, yeah.
to make it like a four-way stop there.
Well, from a emergency response standpoint, it makes the most sense.
Yeah,
Because you
the-
have direct access.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right
that's
from the
what
road.
Chief said was.
Still gonna have to
direct
stop
straight
and take the
instead of
chain
going
down.
all the way around the,
Yeah.
down the street
I
and
think you're
around.
talking-
Sounds like they want it
Jerry, I
here.
didn't hear what you said, Jerry.
See, they're still gonna have to stop and take the chain down, cause it's gonna be gated or chain across it.
Well, sure, but it's right across from the road, so it makes sense that, why would they wanna make a left turn and then, right?
With a 6-acre parcel, is it really that necessary though to have another egress?
I know, right, I mean,
I
we
don't
don't have
think
an
so,
egress
but- I
over
don't
here
think
by
so either.
apartments, that's what I don't get, you know,
Yeah.
it's, so
It
I'm not
sounded
that,
like- I mean, we had originally not had it on the plan.
Yeah,
And I think it was something he had
yeah.
thought would be nice to have, if nothing else.
It's nice, but you're losing,
Coverage.
yeah, you're losing, and they still got roads, and
Alright.
they still got road access, and they could still get in there,
And if we don't put it in, it's something we could always add after the fact if he doesn't like what it looks like, or, you know, if he says it's too tight of a turn for a ambulance or a fire truck to get to, I mean,
well, I'm just comparing it to the apartments over here, we don't have another access to the apartments, so I don't see where you're losing.
yeah.
But anyway, I'm sorry,
I'd
Paul.
like to take that just a step further, just and I'd like to throw it in the air for the fun of it.
Yeah.
It's something that I thought about since we met.
Yeah.
And I think it would really work out for both parties really, really well. You've got this access, there's kind of an access road coming through
Yes.
here on the bottom.
Yeah.
And is there any way that you guys could use that as your primary entrance to your business premises as well as the campgrounds? And take the heat off of that
Off the
cul-de-sac,
curb.
so to speak?
Yeah.
And even maybe have that as the fire access as a informal entrance to your place?
The current road.
Yeah.
as-
That way, all of the traffic would be away from the homes, basically, except those few down here,
Yeah.
okay? But to me, that seemed to be a natural.
Well, I think it is a natural way to do it, but I think if I was in these homes, where are we, yeah, if I was
Down
in these
there.
homes, I wouldn't be thrilled about that plan.
No.
You've got, what, 2 versus,
Well, and
Plus there's-
and you got also, right where you're talking at that V per se.
Yeah.
Is also not, it's one of the ATV snowmobile trails.
Trails, that's where
that
the
we would
trails
end up
are.
having to cut off possibly, and then try to figure out how to reroute and make, everybody happy on that situation also.
You'd
so-
lose trail access from your ATVs
think
and your snowmobile, and that's trail money.
I think if you
Yeah.
wanted to utilize that trail, I've not thought about it, but I'm thinking as you say it, if you wanted to utilize that road down here, maybe that's the better, access, or like the alternate road, instead of putting in another cut, that you have, we maintain that wide enough and tall enough space for an ambulance or a fire truck to get through.
yeah, cause the real asset though for the folks that are there would be is that they wouldn't have any traffic from your establishment.
You mean this
Right.
side of people?
Right.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying.
But the condos will have all the traffic.
Top.
But the condos would have a
All
little
of
bit more, but I
Plus,
don't know
part of the,
exactly how that is.
one of the issues is when you put a road down there, you're gonna take away, quite a bit of acreage from the 6.3
Yeah,
that you now need.
yeah, that you need. And again, the fire thing is, he said it would be nice. He's got a huge wide road,
Yeah,
and they got turnaround down by the marina.
yeah. I'm just saying if a fireman says it would be nice,
Well,
try to,
I
try to
understand
appease
that, I'm
do
not
it.
disrespecting that at all, but you've got other things you need to
Yeah.
think about here, so, I mean, that was
understand what
one
you're saying.
piece of it.
And keep in mind, we do store over 100 boats at a marina too.
Yes,
So I mean,
You're
30
giving away
more
storage.
cars isn't more in the summer. I don't think it's gonna be as noticeable as everybody thinks, considering on our daily summer inlet and outlet is, could be 100 cars at one time, could be 75 cars a day just for boats alone, not counting the restaurant and bar.
Yeah.
So I hear the 30, 35 extra cars on the road is being addressed more than just realizing it's summer, and we at any given time can have 200 people down that road.
no, I think it's a good offering, but then again, too, it's, those cars coming in and out of there too is putting the boat accesses right there, so is that creating a possibility of more accidents or people missing or seeing people walking, and
yeah, no,
it's creating a potential hazard,
yeah.
but it's an alternative, but.
Now, that would open up a whole can of worms. Is that gonna be a public road, town of Rome road,
Yes,
or
and
is it gonna be a private road?
Right, and then those
So-
people over there want a buffer, so it seems to.
There
me
is a
that-
buffer down there. What's right along the bottom is actually owned by the condo association, not by the lure. Everything below that, what looks like a little driveway,
Yeah,
that's owned by the condo. There's
right,
a wide strip, buffer strip all the way across there.
Right.
You can't run on that, so you'd have to go into your own property, so. It creates just a ton of problems, so.
yeah.
I think we'll start with a number, that would be a good point to work from, and then we could get on to other things, but.
Well, I'd put together a list, and I think Mark has a copy of it. I guess it's like,
She had her hand up. I didn't know if you saw her. She was trying to get your
This
attention,
is
that
our
was all.
discussion, Mr. Chair.
I understand, yeah. We'll have to wait for a while, okay?
I get it, I just thought that it was supposed to be you guys discussing and then Mark and the rest of us. would
Well,
answer.
basically, it's our discussion with
Yeah.
for the landowner and his proposal.
I didn't know, thank you.
Can we ask some general questions before
Yeah.
we decide on
Oh, yeah.
that?
Yeah.
When you were talking about the lighting,
Yeah.
do you have an insurance obligation for liability purposes that you need to have higher standards? And
For
by standards, I
lighting?
mean lighting.
For lighting?
Yes.
So I haven't shown this plan to our insurance agent yet, because I don't know what the final plan is. I'm sure they will have an opinion, and I expect that the roadway will require some number of higher lights. You know, my goal would be to have those ideally like on a tree, instead of putting in additional posts or cutting down tree that's there, and having kind of downward facing LED floodlights or something.
So if we were to make a condition regarding lighting, that would still have to be approved by the insurance company, or they would mandate that.
I expect they would be okay
Which-
with what
okay.
you say, or, you know, doing a little more. You know, I don't think they're gonna say that they want it dark.
I didn't think so, that,
Yeah. Yeah, so I think there will be lighting, it's just a question of how much do we need to do and how little can we get away with, so it's not, light pollution and an eyesore to neighbors that it's lit up, you know, 24/7.
And are you going to have standard like check-in, check-out times, like every check-in at 11 o'clock? So would that make the traffic a little bit more prevalent during those time frames, or what?
I would hope it's, if anything, more palatable, you know, that we're not, usually people aren't checking in and checking out right at rush hour type hours. You know, checkout is, think about it, a hotel or an Airbnb, checkout's 10 or 11. That's not a big traffic time. Check-in might be after 4 PM, which, depending on where they're coming from, and, you know, that might end up being during rush hour, but it might also be arriving at 8 PM. So, I don't think that in and of itself would be the issue. A lot of this is streamlined and kind of automated through the software we would be using. You know, they can screen the guests, you know, if they've had, same as Airbnb, if you misbehave at your Airbnb this weekend, you might get banned from using the service in the future. So there's some checks and balances there. They can keep track of IDs, you know, licenses for the renter. We can screen based on age, you know, so it's not teenagers renting it for a party or something. Those are all doable, and I've expected that that's what we would do, whether you say anything about it or not.
Go ahead.
Oh, I don't wanna interrupt Diane, but along those same lines though, if you do it
for
like
now.
that through a reservation, most RV reservation type places like that online do require you to check in by a certain time and check out at a certain time, so that keeps some regulations in place. That, you know, they're not coming at all different hours of the days
Yeah.
and times, and, I mean.
Nobody
time-
expects a 2 AM arrival. is
Right,
going to be
right, so you
common.
have regulations in place when you
Yeah.
when you have a service like that, so it keeps it pretty standardized that it's not
Yeah.
all hours of the day, that it's, so you have some good business models in place that you're gonna operate this by, I take it then. It sounds like you're really planning to do that.
Yes, I would expect that it's, to what you're saying, I think it would be standardized, and it's the protocols that work nationwide, you know, for this type of thing, and we could put our own spin with some of those pieces. You know, we can set our check-in and check-out hours, we could set an age limit, you know, saying nobody under 18 or whatever. That's
Well, that-
doable.
And, excuse me, and if I can,
No, sorry, no primary renter under.
Oh,
you know,
under
yeah.
primary renter, I was gonna say, okay.
and just as, I don't know how many of you guys camp, but I travel and camp a lot. Just cause we're supposed to check out by 10 or 11, most campers have another destination they go to and
Go
end
to,
up
right,
leaving
they
by
gotta
6
be there.
o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning. I know when I'm traveling, just cause my checkout time is 11, I usually my wife wants to get on the road by 8, you know, so we can get to the next destination wherever we're going. So I don't foresee, say, we have 10 campers, they're all leaving at 10 o'clock.
Right.
And we would, I'm just gonna add, have, just like most nicer campgrounds have restrictions on their RVs. so that they're not, most nice campgrounds have a 10-year limit. So that, you know, nothing older, like 1979 pulling in there, you know, with awnings and such that are not blowing smoke, and it's not a beautiful sight to look at. And there's nothing wrong. I've stayed at a lot of campgrounds that you had to send a picture of your camper before you could even arrive there. Just for, the fact is, they don't want ugly campers there, you know, and that's, I think would be helpful to us too.
So does that mean you're not gonna have tent camping?
Well, that was in the proposed suggestions, but that wasn't, our goal is to be able to allow it. I think we will be catering more to RVs, but I like the flexibility of filling in vacancies with a tent. But I don't see it being the primary thing. And if I've got a gravel pad, people may not wanna camp on my gravel pad anyway, but I like the flexibility of offering it. I think it's a relatively low demand thing to allow in the space, you know, whether it's tent or rooftop tents, the pull behind tents and campers and trailers. I think, you know, the way we've looked at it as a campground for what we could allow. And I think we would be catering more if we have RV pads and hookups.
Well, you plan on having, oh, I'm sorry. You plan on having all, according to your design you've given us, you plan on those all being gravel pads, correct?
We plan on unless I'm told that everything has to be paved, which I'm hoping you don't.
No.
I'm expecting that everything would be gravel pads, yes.
Yeah, and most tent campers don't wanna camp on gravel pads.
Yes.
They do at Lake Arrowhead, but they
No.
aren't all gravel pads.
No.
There's rustic sites in there.
Right.
They'll go down to Petenwell and Castle Rock.
Right.
I used to be on the Parks Committee, so I kinda know some of these
Yeah.
things. They're not gonna wanna, unless, yeah, they're really desperate and they can't find
Yeah.
anywhere else to go.
Or if it's a rooftop tent or,
Right.
you know, whatever, but.
Right.
Yeah, I think if we say that we're gonna say, no tents, you start splitting hairs, you know. And I would prefer to leave it flexible and people can self-select, saying, I wouldn't wanna sleep on that gravel.
Now, what about your sites you have elsewhere on there, though, if they have like a unit there that's a permanent structure, like you were proposing the luxury models?
Yeah.
And somebody comes and rents that, would you want a tent camper outside of that? Or
Like-
you would not allow that?
Like if let's say it was a luxury park that slept 5 and they were coming as a group of 8 or something.
It was a family, like
Yeah.
a family reunion, and the littles would wanna,
Sleep outside like kids do.
Yeah, I mean, I personally wouldn't have a problem with it, but I'd be open to saying, well, if you're more than 5, that's what the space allows, and we need to have you rent two slots, you know, and you do the tent next door.
okay.
You know, the goal is not to see how we can sneak one past and start sleeping 16 to a pad here. I mean, the goal is to have this be a place that people wanna come, and it's not a nuisance next door.
Thank you.
What are your plans for parking? You know, people are gonna be they might be dragging a boat, they might be dragging a trailer with a ATV, UTV on it, the big mobile homes might be dragging a spare car.
Yeah.
Are you gonna have something set aside for parking, or how do you plan on operating with that?
Yeah, so I think it would depend on what we're allowed in terms of the pads that we're requesting right now, but as I said, if we cap things and say, well, we're only gonna allow, 28 total rentals, I've got 35 pads here now, so it would be easy to say, well, those remaining 7, we're gonna mark that they are parking only. I don't think it would work from a county or a DNR standpoint for us to start adding a lot more gravel to widen everything, or, they don't want a lot more impermeable surface, and they consider gravel less impermeable than cement or asphalt, but
Right.
they consider it kind of impermeable, especially compared to the sand around it.
And we do have that one big area
Yeah.
by the roundabout that they can unload their
Yeah.
boats or second vehicle.
We've got a good area before they even pull in that they could unload, they could drop their boat off in the restaurant parking lot. And we're already used to having a lot of boats, overnight or
been out on the grass overnight, so there's other places to park that aren't inside this park. I wouldn't want anything parked on the roads, and I wouldn't want anything parked on the road inside. It would be parked on your pad or in the restaurant lot.
So do you, like, if you came in a big RV, allow one additional car on that pad or next to the RV, or they would be required to park in a separate location, do you think, or?
Yeah, so there was a suggestion on here about the size of pads, so it had said 20 by 50. A 20 by 50, you'd be able to, you know, have your RV and a space for a car.
Right behind
and
it.
Your tent or awning, you know, behind it, next to it. It would fit just fine. So you'd be able to get your vehicle in and off the main thoroughfare.
Just a short question, you may have hit it already. That boat launch area and parking lot, is that yours or is that the county's?
So the one that you see on the map,
It's 30413?
yeah, the one you see on the map
Yep,
here is the county one.
okay.
And then
Same with that dirt
ours
road.
goes down,
Yep.
down onto the beach, you know, off the beach is the one that's ours.
Yep, I often wondered that, but that is
Yeah.
county, okay.
That one that you were asking about, is not used nearly as often. It's very steep and not overly friendly for getting a boat in and out.
Been there,
It's
done
better
that.
than nothing, but it's not used much compared to ours, which is much nicer and more level
Flat.
for access.
Yep,
Yeah. You need good brakes on that. The steep.
or you get a car wash.
Well, or, yeah.
50 feet long.
The smaller pads that you have on the,
This-
in that area,
Yes.
what do you propose for those? Now, you had talked about tiny homes or
Yeah.
park models, or
Yeah.
what's your thoughts there?
Well, so I mean, in my ideal, I'd ask to have these gravel pads that I'd be able to have the camping type things on until I can get the budget to put, some type of the park model homes or a tiny home on wheels or something. The reason I had requested for that flexibility is because I don't have the budget to do that this year. And so that's kind of my 3-year vision for the space, is to add some of the more, permanent / semi-permanent spots. The reason for liking the ones on wheels is I think they're quirky and they're interesting. I think I would get people that wanna stay there. And also as they age, you then just sell them and get a new one, same way you buy a new camper. I wouldn't have to tear down a permanent structure or remodel, you know, an aging permanent structure. And if we put some, you know, here and neighbors don't like it, I can hook it up to the truck and wheel it down the way to a quieter path. So I think it gives a lot more flexibility for the business model and for kind of what I envision it to be.
Looking at those, they must be like 20 by 50 pads inside the circle. Those, nope, yep, those and to your right, all those there.
Yeah.
What type of space do you have left in there once all those pads are in place? I'm thinking like for drain fields for septic, or
Yeah.
things,
So-
something like that.
Yeah, so Dan has been the primary person talking with Garrison Septic about that. They do our septic and our well and everything already. And they felt that there would be space to have it here. They also felt there could be some space here or over here. But, the goal from how we've been thinking about it would be to keep it in this interior area. If for no other reason than I don't wanna cut down anything outside of the circle
Right.
that I don't have to.
Okay.
They felt pretty confident that they would be able to get it to fit in that center area. It would be a question, do they do one single field? Do they do kind of an east and a west field? That's where we're at right now. We were waiting to get their final thoughts and test the soils and everything until we know what the footprint's gonna look like.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, just Garrison's, you know, I met with him a couple different times, went over this. His main, again, is instead of there's multiple ones like he said, but again, he is hoping to, it's hard to get through there and just look right now, so he's kinda hoping once it's at least the road's cut in, then he can get in there further and give us a better evaluation of where it would be, if it's one big one or multiples, is where he stands right now.
And Garrison is one of the best, so they would work with with Dustin at the county under 294, so get the permit for that.
Yes.
Meaning chapter 294 for a private septic for a campground, because they do the sanitary.
Right, and he's familiar with campground septics, obviously, and he hasn't seen any problems or any, with it, just that I know he prefer to keep it multiple units instead of one, because one would take up more space, because then you'd have to have bigger pumps and go upwards or downwards. So his ideal thought was just, maybe 2 or 3 septic.
So he's already talking multiples, like
Correct.
we have at the
Correct.
home grounds for the trap shooting association.
Correct.
Chairman?
I'm a little fuzzy with regard to this being zone B1 and getting a campground conditional use permit. And camping units, as described in a campground, are not permanent, I don't believe. It can't be a permanent structure. So does that prohibit them from not being able to do a permanent structure?
Can I answer that? Cause I spoke.
Sure.
We've had the same conversation with Dan in zoning. not
Which
my
is
Dan.
another question. I don't know why Dan isn't here,
Yeah,
but
I can't answer that.
I would appreciate him
No, well-
being
But-
present at our
Yeah.
meetings.
So my understanding of it from when I spoke with Dan is that he said if we wanted to do the units on wheels, he didn't think there would be a zoning problem with that.
You didn't
because-
think?
I don't wanna say he was sure.
Okay.
I mean, he didn't think there would be any issue getting us okay to do that. He said it would be based on the type of mobile unit it would be, like a single wide or a double wide trailer. He said we wouldn't be able to get that approved, because once those move once or twice or a third time, they're considered to lose structural integrity, and we wouldn't be able to rent those out. He said if we do the types of units that I'm hoping to do, those are actually on a DOT certified trailer. They have a VIN number, and he said those you can move daily and it's fine. You could rent them out. Depending on the height from the ground, they would maybe or maybe not require like steps and a railing and things like that, but he said there'd be no issue there. For a permanent structure, if we put cabins in, I think the zoning would maybe have been easier for us if we only asked for the cabins, because that would be more on the resort piece, which is not a conditional, that's an approved one, so.
So
Feel free to jump in, say
well,
it.
I can kinda, I think that's the setup to the answer, right, is that if we were just talking about cabins, they could do that, right, and we would likely be processing this just as a site plan of operation.
Correct.
The reason that this would work is because you'd be considering the campground side of things as a conditional use permit, and you'd also be considering if they were doing cabins, if we were talking cabins and that was, part of your approval here, you'd be doing the cabins, as part of the site plan and plan of operation. In other words, it'd be somewhat mixed in that regard, but still, based off of what they're asking for, is a conditional use, for purposes of the campground and campsites.
Yeah, thank you.
Tom?
We have a conditional use application here that says campground, and this is probably more towards Nick than you. It seems like we're mixing tiny homes with a campground. And I guess my question is, where do these tiny homes fall into play? Can they get the health inspection that a short-term rental needs to actually rent them out? And because I agree, the cabin, 100% correct, it says permitted use. Right in the code, it says resort cabins and cottages, summer and winter. Ski lodges And then you flip the page over to the conditional use, and it says travel trailer park in one spot. I believe it doesn't say, I believe it says travel trailer park. So my question is, in my understanding of a campground, you are sleeping in the bed you provide. I guess that's where my thinking is coming in here. If these are for rent, do they meet? I know we're not going into plan of operation, but they're asking us to approve a conditional use permit. Do the tiny homes meet the short-term rental criterias that this town has set forth? And I don't believe they do, because I don't believe they can get the health inspection from Wood County on a trailer that has a license plate on it that theoretically is safe to tow down the street.
So I'm not going to give an answer to whatever the zoning administrator told them. I do understand the concern. I would say, based off of the question that you had last time, as after I gave it some more thought, I still stand behind that we could put in to place a condition that requires them to submit the room tax report and abide by our short-term rental criteria. I would also say that a campground in every situation is not going to be void of cabins. There are certainly campgrounds that have a mix of those. And lastly, I don't know if cabin and tiny home are synonymous. I think there would be some standards that, maybe would be discussed there.
Well, I would consider a cabin something that has a foundation, which would be a permanent structure.
Yes.
Which would then go on to property tax bill. I consider a home with wheels a non-permanent structure. This is when my brain's going crazy. Are they allowed to be, because we can't approve something that doesn't, flip side, you can't legally rent it in the town of Rome for an overnight stay. If this was just a campground, he had all campsites, and you could only come with your own vehicle and park it, sleep in your own bed, that's one situation. But we're working on two different situations here. And then a final point is, with the bathhouses, all those other houses, unless I'm reading something wrong, under B1, it says that a minimum width must be 24 feet. So then how do these structures that they want to put permanently that are 8, 12 feet, I forgot the exact measurements. I mean, those are my questions for it. Talking points.
Well, one thing you brought up is that the units you want are actually DMV, they got a serial number, et cetera. So essentially, it's a trailer.
Yeah, yeah.
Am I correct? And I guess the question would be, can you rent a trailer? Can they rent a trailer?
We have not considered trailers to be rented
That-
under our short-term rental, and that's, again, what I said to you, Mr. Gabriel, was that we can have a conversation about what that looks like. Okay, and I think I had mentioned cabins or something along the lines of a more permanent structure, which we do have B1 zoned parcels that operate that kind of rentals, and for all the reasons that you said, is allowed. Again, I'm not going to try to speculate what conversations were had and how that was communicated that would be okay. I think in some ways, I guess maybe the communication was, surrounding if seemingly it would be okay, but I don't know if it would actually be okay for a short-term rental.
Go ahead.
No, I liked his last statement. He said that he's not positive that a home on wheels would be okay for a short-term rental. I'm not
For the reasons that
Right.
that to operate at that under our standards,
that's,
they would have to satisfy those standards, right? Just as we would hold to anybody else in this town. And so, again, to make that statement, I sure hope that there was a review, if the statement was made from the standpoint of renting short-term, that there was a review of what our standards are for a short-term rental.
But now if I take that same synopsis and I have a lot over in Camelot with water, septic, and I wanna put my big beautiful camper on it for short-term rental, and I brought it to this plan commission, that application would be denied.
I
So
don't know
that's
that
why
we
I'm
would- yeah,
confused.
I don't think we would even accept the application and process it.
But does it have to be covered under short-term rental?
Well, that's what they're looking to do.
Yeah.
Can I ask just so what would be the difference of a shed that people turn into a cabin compared to what we're asking now? Besides, I mean, yes, granted it's on wheels, but I know there's campgrounds not far from here with shed-looking cabins that they bought from a local box store and turned
Not in
into.
the town of Rome.
Yeah,
Not down
that's,
the road.
Not in the town of Rome.
yeah, if you're referring to the one down on Z that put up those new cabins
not
that we
the
can
town
see
hall.
from Z, I would agree, they look just like, and they
Yeah.
turned them in. But again, our short-term rental that we have in this town is governed pretty strictly. And if you are not allowed to rent a camper, which they said the application would probably got shot out, even though we had water, septic, everything that we needed, we could not complete the inspections on that camper, because I don't believe the fire department will inspect the camper, and I don't believe the health department will inspect the camper, and those are two inspections you need for short-term rental,
Need a building inspection too.
and a building inspection, so,
How does
guess I
it
have one
change?
question.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, I guess I have one question. I mean, if you couldn't do that, you would just go strictly renting the spots, correct?
Yeah,
Can
I
we
mean,
cut this short? Is that
for the
bad?
next 2 years, you know,
Yeah.
year or two, yeah, we just do the pads only. And then maybe we come back and say, can I put 6 stick-built with the foundation things on 6 of these pads?
Okay, so you're flexible with regard to that, in other words?
I mean, I wanna get it done,
This is what
and
I
I already told you, it's not in my budget for the next year.
I
I
think
think,
the idea, if he's flexible with
yeah, I
that.
think the most expedited thing here would be, you know, you could say, we'll allow, you know, anything that the health inspection, the fire department, and whoever approved, you know. If I can get them to sign off on it, fabulous. If I can't, I'm not gonna do it. So, whether that's another conversation with you guys, or whether that's just saying, if I can show you that everyone signs off on it, you'll allow it, it's up to you. I enjoy hanging out with you.
Lori?
I have a question for Nick. Nick, if you take the luxury park models, you take the wheels off and you put them on a permanent base, do they then become a cabin?
Well, would they pass the building inspection? That would be my question, and I'm not a building inspector.
All right.
I think it would have to pass with UDC, comply with UDC. I don't know if it would or
We don't
wouldn't.
know if that would pass UDC,
I
so we
just
need
don't know.
someone to answer that question and that person's not here. Okay, thank you.
Pretty sure they won't pass UDC. UDC,
That's another
those
one.
standards have
Huh?
a pitch and a lot of
Isn't
other
that the
things.
same thing as, but they have they have a slanted roof, they have a ceiling, they have plumbing, they have indoor heating, they have, that's the same thing as a manufactured dwelling, is it not? So it would become a cabin.
I can't answer that.
yeah,
I think
you're asking us to answer a question
No,
that
I'm
we're
not
not
asking.
experts
I'm-
on.
Dan
No, I'm not
Hansen-
asking the question.
Dan Hansen could answer that.
Right.
But I think the thing is that they're flexible, I think that's the key. Yeah, in my opinion.
As far as the conditional use, you know, we could approve a certain number of sites, and we can establish the size.
Right.
And they can then decide how they wanna lay them out, because they probably will have to redo their plan based on a number of sites we're gonna allow them, and spacing and so forth.
Yep.
And some of the setbacks, and
Or potentially where Garrison wants to put the septic, you know, might have
Right.
to move things.
The size of your buildings too, that
Yep.
was brought up by Commissioner Gabriel, that, the size of your building, I think we got new plans here, they were provided in the new packet that Taylor gave us for the buildings. So let's see, the size of your,
Yeah,
They were
these
two
are
s-
actually, they are, I could do those as, again, on wheels or permanent.
no, I'm talking about your bathhouse
I know.
and your, oh,
Yeah. It's the same company that does it, and they said, you know, I think the width of this is because it's flexible where they can do it either way. If you wanted me to double the size, you know, I can make it wider. Again, we're just trying to limit the footprints and only have what I need there.
That's the layout of the bathrooms, or is that the layout of the office you have right there, I believe?
This one's the office,
Correct.
and the other one was the restroom and
Restroom,
the
showers,
laundry,
and laundry.
the
Okay.
Yeah.
facility.
Because all of those fit on the trailer, DMV, VIN number trailers that they are able to build on.
So you were considering those to be mobile units rather than a stationary foundation?
Why?
You,
It could be either.
couldn't you build a 24 by 24 building and put all that into one building structure?
I mean, I can do whatever you tell me I need to do.
Well, I'm just saying,
We were just going with this particular company, cause this is gonna be a one set package.
No,
You know, they're gonna
I
do
see
the,
what you were trying to do.
you know what I'm saying, instead of multiple.
I see what you were trying to do.
but I think even if you say you're not gonna approve that plan, you know, that you need us to have a specific width, it shows what we're looking for. You know, I want an adequate number of restrooms for, you know, use for people that bring their camper and don't have, you know, an RV with a bathroom. We want some laundry facility, we want an office.
What we should do, Mr. Chair, is give them some basic conditions that they need
Okay.
to get, or Nick, some basic conditions to start moving their plan forward, and I think they need some other guidance, cause they seem very incredibly flexible to get some other things moving forward, and they need some guidance on doing that.
If you get the conditional use approved, and then your site plan and plan of operation, how soon after that do you plan on starting your project?
Well, I assumed there would be about 3 feet of snow on the ground right now, and that it would be spring, but, I mean, if you approve it, I'd love to get in and start measuring, you know, the exact road and try to figure out where I can put the road so that it minimizes the number of trees we have to cut down, and start clearing the road sooner than later, so that, you know, Garrison can get in, and if there's bare ground, they can start thinking about the septic, and then I can place some paths around that.
Have you had any conversation with the electric company about electrical to the sites or anything?
There'd be no, at this step of the process, they won't even come out and talk to us or take even a drawing until we're pretty much ready for them.
Yeah. But they have said, when we spoke with them, that they put a new distribution box on that lot, and then it would just be a matter of running conduit and power to any site we wanted to be powered.
we aren't gonna be able to,
I don't think there'd be an issue with it.
Mike,
Pardon me?
we can't approve a site plan until they come back with one and with some detail.
I understand that.
All
I
we
was
can
just-
do tonight is
Right,
conditional
I was
use.
just kinda curious if that had been discussed at all, but I understand it's a site plan issue. Okay, well, obviously there's some basic conditions that we all have in mind that, Mark had talked about with the homeowners or with Andy about, several of the issues, so, do you wanna start with quiet hours?
That's
Well,
plan of operation, that, nothing to do with conditional use. Quiet hours is gonna be part of the
Really?
plan of operation, should be.
So you can do it one of two ways. We are unique in this town because we have that additional requirement in addition to a conditional use permit. You can either have that discussion, talk about it so they can put together a plan for your site plan, and then when you get to the site plan, you incorporate all these conditions by reference. That's one option you could do. So you could have the conversation now to, you know, other commissioners' comments. That gives them, you know, some of the guidelines that we expect. So I mean, I'm trying to say that to open it up a little bit broader so you can have that discussion and not parse between them necessarily as this is site plan only. There are going to be some things that are specifically site plan, but you can do things like the quiet hours, and then when you get to the site plan, you can incorporate it by reference if you choose to do that.
just the ones that are in our code.
page in front of me.
There was an itemized list passed out at our last meeting that shows the conditions or the items that we should be looking at. There's 11 of them
Okay.
for potential conditions.
And it would be hours of operation, buffering, maximum floor area, or in this case, maybe, cause we haven't really determined the types of buildings yet, or structures that you would have. So maybe it would be maximum camping area, like I had said, had referred to the Arrowhead Campground. Maximum number of units, maybe instead of maximum number of patrons. Uses within those buildings, again, the type of structures we're talking about. Number or location of entrances, outdoor activity and storage. Types of food service or retail allowed on the site is one of them. Delivery of type services and signage, which if we're gonna talk about hours of operation, things like that, signage, we've talked about that a number of times at our different meetings. Signage, I would think that, Dan had talked about directional signs within the campground. So, or signs that would show the types of ordinances we already have in the town that say nuisance, hours of noise that they can have, instead, so, cause we already have noise, we know that if it goes past this hour, bands can't be playing at the different establishments we have in the town. Lights out or things like that, so those are the conditions that were in our list that we had, if you don't all have it with you. Modified some of them again, because maximum floor area, again, what types are we're talking about permanent units versus the ones that are on wheels. Number of patrons, we're talking really about units, so if we're talking about the number of units or cabins that they have or campers, that'll pretty much tell you how many people they're gonna have there.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
I would like to address the potential devaluation of property values. And I believe that could be a premise of denying the conditional use permit. And I'd like to thank the people that are going to be probably most affected by this for giving us all of the information and providing us with documentation that I think is legitimate. I'm not too sure about the 1972, although it was very in-depth and very, but,
You don't like Montana?
well, no, I think it dealt more with a different kind of a matrix here, but.
Yes, it did.
But still, the amount of time and attention you have devoted to this, I think, is phenomenal, and I appreciate it. And I also feel some of that information is viable for us possibly not even doing a conditional use permit and denying it. And I do believe that the possibility of proving devaluation of property values is number one. There's a home right across the street that is up for sale right now for $850,000. I have some Zillow maps that are showing valuations of properties there that are a lot. If you take 5% of a devaluation, you're talking 40 grand plus on these properties. To me, that's significant. And if you look at the statutes, and if you look at other litigation that has gone on, I believe, that verified significant, I think this would fall under that parameter. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just saying that this is what I found.
Okay.
So, that's it.
I would like to comment on their concerns. I appreciate the effort that they would put into this. And I understand their concerns. I appreciate the fact that the business owner wants to expand his business. It's a viable business, and I appreciate everybody's comments that they work together to try to solve this issue. But I again go back to the fact that we support all businesses in the town and all homeowners, and if you're gonna talk about just valuation, I look to the Lake Arrowhead Campground. It's right in the middle of a golf course and it's across the street from the Lido. And if you look at the home values just this year when the tax bills went out, there's one property that's at the driveway entrance to the campground and the sports field of Lake Arrowhead. That value went up this year from $144,200 to $258,600. And that is within 29 feet of the driveway. The backyard is 174 feet from the sports field and the campground. There's another home that's went from $151,500. This year, the valuation went to $277,500. Their backyard is 146 feet from the campground. There's a brand new home. Its valuation this year was $443,800. Their backyard is 189 feet from the campground, and it's 119 feet to the nearest campfire with a fire ring. And it's a newer home built within 1.5 years, and it's 189 feet from the golf course. This entire campground is 552 feet from the Lido. Many times we all have beautiful homes that we love and we take care of, and they always build things that maybe we're not very proud of or happy about or excited about to have in our neighborhoods. And I understand that businesses need to do things too. The question was asked last time by Commissioner Gabriel about a 36-unit condo being built on that same land. Or what if they built a strip motel on that piece of property? You don't know what a motel might bring in. I mean, this is a viable business, it's a good business, just because they wanna put a campground there doesn't mean they're gonna bring in riffraff. I mean, it's a viable business, and I would hate to deter a business from bringing more. It might even increase the value of this community and the value of those homes. And I just gave very good examples.
Well, with all due respect, the campground at Lake Arrowhead is not an apples to apples. There are 44 sites there, 42 of which are seasonal, which means that they are rented out by members and or guests of members for the entire season, or they can do like daily or weekly. The seasonal campers have been there for years. If there is an issue or if there is a problem, the association can deny that member the ability to utilize that campsite. That is not the situation here. So it's not an apples to apples.
Mark,
And the fact that over the last several years, there have been no issues with that campground.
That's correct. How do you know there'll be
Because there
issues
have been-
with this one? Mark, do you own another viable business?
Several.
What are they, please?
I own a downhill ski hill in central Wisconsin with Airbnb units. I own an Airbnb out of state. And the ski hill has restaurant and bar and 3 different businesses.
And which one is it, please?
The ski hill, Piro Basin.
Thank you. So we're gonna just assume because it's in a more higher priced area, it's gonna draw riffraff?
I'm saying significant devaluation is something that is a viable, in my opinion.
I understand it's a possibility, but
Can I add to that just a tad? So they did their search for their Zillow prices and such, so have I. I looked at, Peatmore Park Campground. There's a home right around the corner for $549,000. Google mapped it, then Zillow searched it. The price of that house has never changed. Same with, that was, Peatmore Park. I looked at 5 different homes within range. There's more homes in that area, but the ones closest to it, not counting, some of them are kind of like cabin homes, seasonal. I've looked at Fireside Camp on Z. I Google searched the 5, 6, 8 houses closest to that, and then Zillow searched those addresses, cross-referenced. The prices of them never decreased. So if there's gonna be a 40% or 5% guess, that's a guess. I mean, these are facts. They're facts that these Zillow searches, unless Zillow's wrong, the prices in all these homes have never changed. They have never went down, they've went up. Of course, some have changed upwards, or their taxes have changed because we just did a tax increase. But the value of their homes, if it's 800,000 or 500,000, being almost the same distance, which Petenwell Park has, I don't know how many more sites than we have, with a lot more traffic than we would have, and their home values around that area have not decreased. So if we're gonna match one, you gotta match the other. You gotta look at both sides. You know, right now, obviously, everybody's submitting the negative and leaving the positive out. And the positive is, according to Zillow, there's no decrease in house value. I just wanted, that's a fact that anybody can search.
I would just use other campgrounds as comparison, because Castle Rock, when properties go up for sale, they sell, and there's a huge campground there that's very, very popular as well.
No, I didn't look at Castle Rock, I just looked closest to us.
Well, Castle
good
Rock's
point.
actually made many TV programs as well, because the properties don't stay on the market very long, but.
But thank you.
And I think, you know, the difference that you mentioned is that, some of these are controlled by the HOA or anything like that. Obviously, that's not what this one would be. The HOA folks know where to find us. I mean, we're not going anywhere. The bar's right there, the restaurant's right there, the marina's been there, you know, all these things are there. I gave my email out, you know, that got my cell phone. So I'm sure I'm gonna hear about it if this is approved and there is any nuisance, and we will.
Well, I just don't know how much that would assuage a new buyer.
Sure.
I don't know.
understand what you're saying. I think it's, you know, different people are looking for different things. I think I would be fine with it, you know, I'd be fine with having a place that's near a restaurant and a marina and, you know, campground where a family can stay when they come visit. Probably as much as somebody else would say, oh, I would hate that, and if they would, they probably would hate being next to the restaurant and the marina and the concerts that are gonna be there. So, I think it would be very hard to do an apples to apples of, you know, what's the pro, what's the con economically in that sense.
And I'm not arguing that, you know, people would be concerned about their home values. I understand they have a concern. But Act 67 does say that, you know, we can set terms. That's why we're here today, is to set requirements and conditions. But Act 67 also says, you know, there's nothing that allows us to completely deny this. And to just say devaluation is a possibility, I know one person brought forth, and we read all of those emails. One person brought our assessor's opinion that they heard, but it's not on his letterhead. There's nothing to say that he, I mean, if we.
Didn't our own town appraiser, somebody submitted?
Yeah, but it wasn't his letter. It wasn't his letter on his letterhead. How do we know that he actually said that? He may have said it to them in a phone.
It was his email.
On
that was
his
attached to my
letterhead?
letter.
On his letterhead?
It isn't on letterhead. People don't put emails on letterhead.
Well, excuse me, sir,
Go
I
ahead.
don't wanna argue with,
I understand.
I'm just saying though, that's not on his letterhead, and Tony can say that, but for us to take that as evidence, I guess I would want it on his letterhead.
Go back and read it, Diana.
Pardon
Go
me?
back and read it again. Go back and read it again.
What?
The whole thing.
Okay.
The whole
The
email.
email and what he said.
Let's just continue here.
Act 67 says that we can set requirements and conditions that, you know, but
Go ahead.
it has to be, the terms are specifically, it says right here, and I keep writing them down, specific and measurable. But we can't just, they could wait another year and come back with a higher and better use, but it still might be something they don't like. We have to use specific and measurable conditions.
Well, that's if we're gonna do a conditional use permit, that's correct. But if we deny it, we don't have to worry about that. Just saying.
Well, at this point, I don't know that we have the grounds to deny it, just based on a possible devaluation of a house.
Are you asking me?
If you wouldn't mind, please.
I'll just give a general comment to it. So, understanding you know, where the comments are coming from. I'd also agree with Commissioner, I'll call you Commissioner because you're at the commission, Jamadi, is that there are examples of situations that cause specific concerns and whether or not that led to grounds for denial. And I think one thing that is also clear that should be mentioned is that something like traffic impact has come up from time to time as concerns. I'm not saying in this project, but you know, with conditional use permits, and whether or not that can be grounds to deny. And the answer is, well, perhaps, but there also needs to be an opportunity to mitigate the concern with conditions. And I think that's what's being left out here, because it can be a concern, but if we're talking about do we have grounds and can we deny, I would just say that if we're not giving the opportunity to mitigate the concerns and we're just going to slam the gavel, that would be problematic. And I think the examples of traffic impact that are out there show that.
How do you mitigate a property that sells $40,000 less than what?
Yep. Entrance points, buffer, location of sites, types of, you know, are you doing cabins? You know, what exactly are you doing? Location of those sites, light spillover. I mean, I can keep going down, but it lists up to our, so after Act 67, we did a pretty good overhaul of our ordinance. The points that were raised there, I think 11 that were said, actually, if you go to our ordinance under conditional use, remember, the conditions need to be related to the purpose of our ordinance. Before Act 67, we had very general purposes. I don't love general purposes, health, safety, welfare, that's so general, right? If you look in our conditional use section, I think we've got 13 specific things that we can tie conditions to. And again, I'm not saying that's not grounds to deny, as long as we have, you know, significant foundation to do so. But to do so without having a conversation about whether there's mitigation, okay, is probably problematic, is what I'm saying, Commissioner Gagliardi. So, Togi, sorry.
You can call me Diana.
And if I just might add, in here, it comes right from the university and right out of the statute. It says, decision to approve or deny the permit must be supported by substantial evidence, and it refers to case after case after case. Just came up with a bunch more that ended up in court in 2023. So I just emphasizing what Nick said, you have to go through and make sure you have what you need to deny.
Can I add one other piece to that? I would just question if, you know, if we're trying to compare the potential impact of this project, you know, I'm hearing comparison of this project versus if we left it as is with Forest. And I'm not going to leave it as Forest and bought for a business purpose. And so I think really the question should be, do the neighbors think it will be devalued more if I put a Motel 6 right there? Thank you. I mean, that's my point. I think this is actually low impact and potentially benefits the area, whereas a motel feels easier to do, but it would be less good for the area. So I'm trying to do what I think is right for the area, and not going to create a problem.
And Mr. Chair, if I just might emphasize what, what Mark says here, if I might, Mark, emphasize when they talk about conditional use, and they emphasize this in different classes and training through UWSP and Madison and the legal law libraries, they say, find conditional, or find compatible uses for properties when you're looking for substantial evidence. So this is, believe it or not, a compatible use for that piece of land versus a Motel 6 or a storage unit or a building that they're gonna work on boat engines all day and park boats out there. we're trying to work with a business, he's trying to work with us, he's trying to work with the neighbors. So that's why I started off with fewer campsites. Jerry, Commissioner Wiesner suggested the same thing, smaller campsites. He's working with us, we're working with him, we're working with the neighbors, so please, no Motel 6, no boat engines running all day. I mean, he's working with us, so those are the things, I understand what you're saying, but come up with some reasons how that's gonna work.
Well, unfortunately, I don't have my desktop with me where I downloaded the 2 lawsuits that were brought. One of them specifically did deal with properties losing their value as being considered substantial. And it was up to the Plan Commission to determine the percent of substantial. They were saying anywhere from 10 to 50% of the valuation based on a $143,000 home. So if you equate that to, you know, the properties that are in that area,
Ours just all went up though with that.
Jerry?
All right, we're just gonna go on all night here if we don't do something different. I put together these conditions that I recommended to try to make this an upscale RV park that would be attractive to the neighborhood. And I would like to make a motion to approve the conditional use permit with the following conditions. Basically, it's everything that I have documented, other than the first one was considered a name change RV park. That's up to them to do, but only would we limit the sites to 28 sites. You want me to read all these conditions?
yes,
Does he have a copy of it up
He
there?
has a copy.
I have
Okay.
it, but it's not his revised version. So you just said 28 sites?
Okay,
Is that what you said?
yeah, limit the total number of sites, 28 sites. All sites to be RV sites or cabin sites. Cabins must be on a permanent foundation. All RV sites are to be a minimum of 20 feet by 50 feet with a minimum spacing of 50 feet between sites. All roads and sites must be hard surfaced, which can become compacted gravel. Tent camping should be prohibited unless accompanied by an RV unit. Setback from the road right-of-way should be 50 feet in lieu of the 30 feet. All campfires should be restricted to an enclosed fire pits with a maximum diameter of 36 inches. Vegetation screening shall be installed in the setback area at a minimum height of 6 feet when planted. If we want to put hours in there, quiet hours should be from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. to 7 a.m.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Is there any second? Is there a second for Jerry's motion? Hearing none, then the motion fails for lack of a second. All right. So I'm sorry, I don't have my copy of the 13 conditions for a conditional use permit.
No, it's not 13 conditions, it's 13,
zone.
they're criteria.
Criteria, okay?
There's, actually, sorry, 12 criteria
Okay.
for conditions. And again, all that gets to is that your conditions should relate back to the purpose, and these are criteria that your conditions can relate to. They're not conditions. They're just criteria that your conditions can relate to.
Okay.
And I guess, they're broad enough that I think, you know, even the conditions that were just read relate to. So I mean, I can read them to you, but again, they're just give us grounds to put conditions
Right.
in place that are not just, you know, based in general health, safety, and welfare.
I'm just wondering if we consider each criteria separately as a group and then come up with an idea? It's just my thought. I don't know. I've never done this before, so I'm kind of flying blind here too.
I mean, I can read them. That might not be incredibly easy on some of these criteria, but there may be some that would, is that what you'd like me to do?
Well, I guess I'll go with the consensus of the group. Lori?
Why don't we look under B1 here quick? Are you looking under B1?
Yeah. We're,
360-27, which is conditional uses,
okay.
and then it's under G for review criteria. That's what you can put. That's
because
the
it is
that's what we
business, why don't we s-
yeah that's what we had put our when we had made the adjustments after Act 67. We had
Okay.
Why wouldn't we consent? Let me just look here quick. I wanna look at something.
yeah they're just criteria that your conditions kind of can be grounded in.
It's just prior to the one I was showing you. It's 360-27, conditional use.
Yeah, and then what was brought up earlier is just the table below it, is all. Those are potential conditions. So for example, what we do is we set criteria, and then after Act 67, we had a lot of discussion, a lot of the same kind of discussion, in fact. Well, what does that mean? What kind of conditions can we put in? So what we did was we put a table in that talked about the types. That's not all inclusive, it's types and with a potential condition. That's what that table is doing. But you'd want to look at the criteria above it. That's
I think the second one that Jerry had mentioned is limit the total number of sites to 28.
I think 30 gives them the space they need for each of the sites, but if he's,
I'm just
Throwing it out.
throwing it out there to see what kind of response we get from all the commissioners.
Are you sure you want that?
Well, I have to ask for it, I would believe.
Okay. I say we do the 30, if we're gonna change it.
If you put a size on the sites and a spacing on the sites, it'll be up to them to determine how many sites they can stuff into that 6 acres with their other buildings.
how about we give them the range then, 28
Well,
to
28,
30?
they got a range up to
30.
28.
I'm sure you wouldn't complain if I do fewer, so if you cap it at 30, we're gonna see what we can fit based on any other requirements you give me.
Are we in agreement that 30 would be the maximum number of sites that we would want to see
Yeah.
allowed?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
Your original request was what?
It's for 35.
35.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, this one has already been worked through because you've had the applicant, respond to it. But maybe as we talk through how that process goes, as we go through this or any other conditions, it would likely be a good idea just to ask the applicant if that is acceptable. That's part of Act 67.
Certainly,
So that way there can be a dialogue in what that looks like and what the condition is.
understand.
Thank you.
Are we that concerned about a name right now until we figure out actually what kind of units he's gonna put in here?
No, that was a
Okay, so we can
suggestion.
just not worry about a name right now, are you good with that? Because we're
Yes.
still working on the sign issue?
That wasn't one of
Yeah,
the
that could be
conditions.
part of our
No, but I'm just saying though,
site plan and plan of operation discussion later.
Okay, the 28 to 30 sites were mentioned. Obviously, we're looking at 30. Do you have a issue with that at the moment?
30's fine, yeah. If we decrease to 30 and I have the 35, is it okay if I keep some of my unused slots that are currently on the map for parking? Would that be a problem? If they were clearly noted that they were not for,
Not for
Camping,
RVs or
yeah.
camping or anything?
but just for parking, so I have some space off the road?
so you're thinking like for trailers, if they have
Like a boat
ATVs?
trailer.
A boat
Yeah.
trailer,
Yeah,
ATV trailer, yeah.
as long as they have the buffer
Yeah.
like the rest of the campsites, where are you thinking on your map, Mark, are you?
I'm not thinking specifically,
Okay.
I'm thinking the very tight, ones to the upper left of your map as you're looking, closest to the north HOA. If I took out a couple of those, here, I can open this back up. If I took out a couple of these, for instance.
Oh, so there'd be
and
trees there still buffering that, so nobody'd
But
see them.
I'm thinking if I made this one twice as wide as a single pad, so there was some parking and everything there.
People could leave their trailer there,
Right,
but they're,
then
yeah.
it would just be, it would decrease the density, but it would still have some space for parking.
I'm open to that.
I'm just thinking as I'm editing this map.
Any other thoughts?
It's B1. So are all the design standards as in zoning in business district, those are all applicable to this site?
At the point of site plan of operation.
Okay. So building the cabin and all that other stuff would fall under that criteria?
In that they would have to bring everything, just like we do with any other B1, development. When they came to that point, yeah, they would have to come with those designs, and, if they don't have it at the time of the first site plan of operation, then they're not gonna be doing it as the cabins or the permanent. But I would consider that also a substantial modification at the time that they would. And then we're looking at it, right? So that's coming back before you. So in other words, you may not see all of that for example, if we're having a conversation about permanent ones, but we're hearing that they may be 2 years from now, then we may not get, designs and colors of those cabins or whatever until they're ready to do that. But at the time that they were ready to do that, that would be substantial enough that would have to come before you.
So in the design standards, with regard to the parking that he's asking for in B1, does it have to be all fenced in B1, do we know?
Fenced, I don't believe fenced.
No?
I don't believe.
No. Okay.
I have to go back to. Parking.
So they would have to abide by that A under the standards.
Right. 10 or more spaces may require perimeter landscaping to visually reduce. How would we determine the number of spaces, or how would that parking that he would like to have in an area? Large parking space requirements must demonstrate an urban, they cannot demonstrate an urban parking lot appearance. Least visual impact. So all of this would have to be in compliance because it's part of the B1 zoning and it's part of the design standard.
At the time of a site plan of operation.
Okay, so in a conditional use though, if he's requesting that he be allowed this parking area, would we need to address that as a conditional use?
I would think
What we could do is set, that we would have, what we could say as part of the conditional use, when the site plan of operation. Never mind.
Jerry?
I really just wanted to know, are you gonna have a problem with that if the next map for the site plan shows, some larger ones for the extra parking? I don't care if you put it in your conditional use or not right now, but I don't wanna keep needing to come back with another question and another question.
Jerry?
It says
was just gonna say
parking
that-
lot in B1.
Never mind.
Go ahead, Jerry. Your turn.
I was gonna say that the conditional use has nothing to do with that parking. He's gonna have to come back with a site plan and he can show the parking. Yes, we can give him our opinion, but it should not be part of the conditional.
Correct.
Okay.
That's why I stopped.
Thank you.
We're getting off on these other
Yes.
sidetracks.
Making
We
it
hear till
too
midnight.
hard.
One of the other things that Jerry pointed out as far as conditional use permit condition is that, I think you've already said you hope that your plans for the pads were 20 by 50?
Well,
That's what I think I saw on one of your maps.
yeah.
One thing I wanna ask about that though, is it's a narrow pad, so if someone would come in with a larger class size motorhome, it's standard, but it's pretty narrow, so I mean,
20 by,
Standard Class A's, Class C's are no wider than a standard road.
right.
So
But
20
you're-
feet wide, it would
yeah.
definitely give them, if
Enough.
it was 12 feet wide, they give them another 8 feet of pad for awning, extra
Okay.
parking, or
All right,
et cetera.
okay.
20 by 50 is the
Standard, but,
current standard recommended size. And I think if we mark it, you know, when we're renting the pads out, if we say this is a 20 by 50 pad, if somebody doesn't think they can fit there, they're not gonna come.
so if we're allowing another 43, 45 feet, got it. So you have enough buffer between and on the outside up to the road, you've got enough with the 30 that we allotted you. Just trying to think measurement, okay, you're good, thank you,
I think for the pad size
you're good.
piece, we're fine there.
So then you wanna set that condition, Jerry, then? Have a minimum of, do you wanna set that as a,
that was my recommendation, 50 feet between the sites. I think on his plan, he's probably pretty close to that.
That was in his motion.
I know, I
Might be
don't know if we
seconded.
wanna
I
set
know.
that though, just.
You're
the
going
s-
back through everything I just read, but
Well, nobody seconded it, so
I know,
I'm just, you
I know.
don't have to get, but I'm just saying, do we even really need to, they've got it figured out, they can just make it part of their plan then.
well, you want spacing so that they aren't parking one on top of another, you know? We want it to look decent.
I think my
Well,
only
if he's agreeable, then we'll put it in there.
My only question, I have no problem with the minimum pad size. I think the question with the spacing between is just, you know, if you look at the map, the sites that are closest to my parking lot are less than 50 feet, probably right now.
Well, that was those real small sites.
Correct. And so,
The
I'm just
53
saying,
50 feet threw it off, is, for me, that was,
yeah.
but,
So I think, you know, my goal would be to have the maximum amount of spacing I can have around the HOA facing sites. I would prefer that you're not putting in a minimum spacing in the conditional use because it's making it more confusing about the sites that don't face the HOA.
right, and you don't know until you start putting this stuff in, but.
I have no desire to have sites on top of each other, so,
Right.
you know, on their area.
That's what made it a little hard, Jerry, but if you wanna put in a minimum pad size of 50 by 50, that's,
We can work with that.
so if that's agreeable, Nick, you wanna put it on the list then, if everybody's agreeable to the 20 by 50?
What about the cabin sites?
Are you asking me?
Just general. No,
mean, those
it's
are
only addressed the RV sites.
Currently, those have been smaller sites. I think what those sites look like is gonna be based on one of those next questions about tent camping prohibited. You know, I wouldn't be able to fit an RV on those sites that are earmarked as cabin, and I'm not gonna be able to afford to put cabins on them for a while. So if we're not gonna allow the tinier ones on wheels, and we don't allow tent camping, I'm gonna have to make those bigger. I'm gonna have to make those 20 by 50 pads also for RVs, which I don't think is a good solution. So,
So then it would, okay, all right.
So we said all RV sites would be 20 by 50, but that isn't for your other cabin sites, just to clarify.
so if you're not gonna put a requirement or a minimum standard on those other ones.
Keep in mind, if we're losing 5, you know, since we were requesting 35, we're getting 30, those actual along, where all the cabins are, those will actually be more spread out now because we're losing 5 spots. So I think it actually now would be more suitable as the distance is required.
Do you think all of your spots that you would remove are coming from that specific group of small pads, or?
Not necessarily. I think it may be, I think the other spot that easily could be lost would be one of the RV sites on kind of the far east edge, if we would put the access road in,
Okay.
or a spot, an RV pad to the southeast edge, closer to the other HOA. Those would be the spots that I'm thinking about removing, the spots that are most likely to be ones that the neighbors would want.
The roads and sites must be hard surfaced was the suggestion. What about the, going out onto Apache Lane? That a portion of that be at least concrete to stop the, the gravel, you know, or even going in and out rather quickly or something like that, that you spin up some gravel would, you know, like maybe, not a lot, you know, just maybe 25 foot
Do you mean-
area, like
do you
an
mean
apron,
concrete or do you mean paved?
paved and or concrete, a hard,
If you say paved, then it's either asphalt or concrete.
Say-
right, something just so that we don't have,
Something that's not gravel.
right,
He did, you would
Right.
mention like 25 to 50 feet or something similar to that.
Felt appropriate.
Kind of from the office area up to the main road.
correct,
And then keep in mind that this county road or, public road is also all rock as it is now
Yeah.
that they use and bring and go across with their boat trailers
Yeah.
and their vehicles, so. But, you know, I would, to P's, and I think it wouldn't hurt, is from the office space to the, I call it the roundabout. Have it some kind of hard surface, if it be blacktop or whatever is, you know.
I would even say like crushed gravel or something.
I was thinking actually the recycled blacktop that they've been
Yeah.
using for driveways now, cause it's not as expensive. And obviously, we're in a tight budget, but it would solve everybody's problem.
So I've gotta be really honest, if I had a nickel for every road that gets crushed gravel kicked up on it, every time an ATV turns a corner, we'd all be rich.
Yeah. So I think if that's, if we're stating that all roads and sites must be hard surfaced and we're okay with that being the gravel hard surface,
Yeah.
you know, and it's not sand or dirt.
Right.
I have no problem with that. And then, you know, the step beyond that we had already offered was, yeah, that
The
25.
entrance to the,
Something more permanent.
I personally would not force you to do that. I would wanna know what Dusty would have to say about that at the county, he might have something.
Did you talk to him?
I
He's
haven't
the one
talked
for
to
land
Dusty
and
yet.
water, that impervious surface, he would have a say about that.
Yeah, it's,
minimal.
again, that's kinda going back to,
That's all gravel and torn up around there anyway, so to force them to put in 25 feet where there's gravel and dirt anyway, seems rather,
And again,
If you-
I think from my standpoint, if this is something you don't require, but it starts to become a problem, we're gonna fix it.
I think you were talking basically for the convenience of the people that are camping, so that, you know, they're not kicking up stones to other vehicles or whatever.
I don't see it as a huge nuisance, but it's just one extra thing that you're right, requiring, but, I mean,
I don't think it'd be a problem if you use compacted road base. It gets hard surface and you don't track anything from it.
the
As long as you
platform you're talking
compact
about
it.
is better
yeah,
than the
I
road
mean,
base.
whatever is required, I mean, like I said, I'm not to speak for Mark, but I think, you know, the 20 feet or so of the recycled blacktop right there, it'd be great, but then, to answer the other board member, that was the original idea anyway, is the crushed gravel that compacts down and ends up being as hard as, you know,
Not concrete though. Okay.
correct.
Mr. Chairman, so is that?
Certainly.
So I'm trying to keep the list. So I've got the, hard surface including compacted gravel. Are we or are we not putting in that 20 to 25 foot additional language?
I don't think it's necessary, but it's up to the rest of them, I guess.
And B1, don't you have to asphalt so far from the center line of the road, though? I'm trying to find,
But that's not a road, that's a parking lot and a driveway.
It's already gravel.
okay.
And
it's
you may
already
be talking
gravel.
about gateway overlay and
Yeah.
the standards we
Okay.
have.
But good try.
So I'm taking out that piece. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't do that on their site
Right.
plan.
If it becomes a problem for
But
them.
it just wouldn't be a condition you.
Kinda as needed.
Okay.
We would want, around your refuse containers, even just for your campground and for your guests and for you, the appropriate
Screening?
screening
That's
for the
going-
refuse containers.
Isn't that going to site plan and plan
Oh, that's right, I'm
operation
sorry.
again?
Thank you, Tom.
I
Another
mean,
good catch.
we're just trying to get,
That's
either
right.
vote him a conditional use permit or
You're right.
denies conditional use
Right.
permit, I think is
Correct.
what we're trying to decide.
Yeah.
So,
I'm taking, the things that you say are gonna be on the next meeting.
Yeah, you're correct.
Correct, but
And this will all be in the minutes, so you'll be able to read it
Pick
all.
through it.
Yeah.
We're kinda going back, it's getting to be a long
Um,
afternoon.
Go ahead.
Okay. Some of the things that I was thinking for conditional use would be that, the conditional use would not be transferable. That,
you saw my facial expression,
I
you were
heard
looking.
it. I heard it all the way over here. It was a nonverbal.
He has to, if we grant him the conditional use though, he has to be able to sell it as a campground in the end.
Campground with the business, it's a whole,
Well, it's just a thought. That there be a functioning security camera on site. That there,
That business
Site plan.
operation?
That's site plan.
okay,
site plan operation.
We need to get to the
the
basics.
duration of stay,
80-20 here.
That's site plan of operation.
anytime that a manager is not available, that they must contact either host compliance or someone else.
Site
so
plan
that
of
someone would-
operation. Sorry.
Isn't that in the findings of fact when we do our conditional use permit, that there's a manager on site, or is that a condition of the conditional use?
It's in our short-term rentals, if that's what you're referencing. Yes, we do sometimes have that as conditions in our short-term rental license
Okay,
conditions.
so,
But
Can we have
in
that as
those,
a-
in those situations, we also don't have a B1 district
Right.
site plan of operations. Again, back to my very earlier point, this is a little bit different in that we have in this town those two standards, right? Which we can put them as conditions and then we would just incorporate them by reference at the site plan of operation if this plan commission chose to do that.
what about the age of rental? Requiring that they be 25 or more, is that the plan of operation too?
Yes.
Okay.
We're making it hard on you today, aren't we?
No, I just,
No, I see
It's-
what you're saying, it's a good list.
we have
though.
a double standard.
Yes, we do.
I think you
So I've got a
Don't throw
few,
the list out.
I've
We're
got a
not
few
saying
examples
that.
that I could give you that
Okay.
maybe would pass conditional use permit versus site plan of operation.
Great.
There-
Or plan, right, business, or the plan, okay.
They're just.
Plan of operation.
They're just examples, and you can throw popcorn at me if you don't like them, but I'll just throw it out there. So I have a few that might be, worth placing as conditions. One is, and a number of these feed to the site plan, that's why they're not site plan, they feed to the site plan. It sets the expectation of what we expect at the site plan. One is to receive a complete campground map for the entire parcel, filed with the town and signed by either an architect, engineer, or surveyor, showing the campground layout, location of all sites, property lines, setbacks, any structures, any water supplies or private waste disposal systems, any recreation areas, and then parking areas.
Perfect.
What about, did you have landscape design on there?
We can include that.
And by a licensed, landscape, what was that reference?
Necessary? Why
I already have, I already have architect, engineer, or surveyor,
Well,
unless you want that specifically with the landscape.
what I was questioning was the number of trees that might be removed and/or, types of vegetation.
Well, couldn't
that
we
would-
just limit that by the amount of buffer that we would require around the edge of the campground?
Yeah, so again, the reason that I suggest that one is that gets a quality document that you can look at with distances,
Right.
areas, and so then when you're looking at that document and you're saying, I think we need to talk about a buffer here,
Yes.
You're looking at it and you're saying, okay, this shows us how far away we are.
Yes.
We have a concern about this. That's why I make that suggestion, and that's why I felt it was appropriate for a conditional use permit.
Yeah, that I like, because then you're not saying, oh, you gotta go out and get a landscape artist, that's gonna cost them $10,000.
But I think we should incorporate a landscape design,
You want a landscape plan,
landscape plan
okay?
in that request,
Okay, I mean,
or in that site plan.
that doesn't set the qualifier that it needs to be by a certified landscaper, but it would just be maybe they bring their proposal as part of the campground map, I guess. Yeah, I mean, that's fine. I'm just trying to, it would be proposed landscaping on that map. Again, I'm talking about just a map.
Yeah,
Like
are you asking that
map,
so you can see buffers and things? Is that where you're looking at a landscape?
Well,
So maybe I just propose, how about we just say,
Lend itself to that.
showing proposed landscaping? Because then, I mean, there may be some deviations there. You know, that is part of the site plan of operation
Yeah.
step. I'm suggesting a campground map, so you have a good starting document to then run through our ordinance requirements and make sure that we're all on the same page as we start talking about maybe other things that are part of their site plan and plan of operation.
Whether you get into the greater detail of what's expected. Mr. Chair, I think,
Jerry?
I was just gonna remind everybody that the current red pines out there provide absolutely no screening below 50 feet or 40 feet. Everything
True.
below that, just a stick sticking up there.
true,
You can almost see all the way through that whole section right now.
true.
Okay, so
So I think your vegetation, vegetation screening at 6 foot
is,
would be, what could be put into the landscape design
right,
that,
so we got a buffer.
correct.
Okay, I've got another one, because this location is a little bit unique, with the lure. No permanent alcohol license shall be applied for or issued for the premises under the approval as a campground. No portion of the campground becomes a bar or tavern. Where I'm going with that
Yeah,
Right.
is
great.
there could be some issues with premises extension. We have had over COVID, some modifications that had to happen after, alcohol, to go, those kind of, regulations that we do have built into our ordinance. We just wouldn't wanna see a premises extension if that was able to be done to go into a campground.
Correct.
Can I ask a quick question about that? We didn't plan on that. Is there an issue with people doing carry out from the restaurant back to their campsite?
Just like I
The
said,
way you're describing it?
there were some changes in the law
Yeah.
for alcohol to go, right?
Yeah.
And if you look, you can see it in our ordinance, we have that right into our ordinance, it's also in statute. So as long as you are selling it in a way that is sealed with a tamper-proof seal and all of those requirements that you
Yeah.
have to do by law,
Yeah.
then that would be okay.
Fine.
What you can't do is get this license, this premises
Yeah.
for alcohol and alcohol service, so
I agree with that.
that
But-
would be.
Make sure the lids are taped when they leave the building.
But they could apply for a Class A beer, wine, permit or license to sell beer on site, but not for consumption, right?
Nope.
No,
Permanent alcohol license, the way I
no
know it.
permit period, okay.
In the little store they would have, it would be shirts, candy, that's,
Toothbrushes, yeah.
yeah,
Correct.
No.
aspirin.
Candy supplies.
Actually, that helps the lure business.
It does. I have no problem with
Yeah.
it.
It's not
They're gonna play
handicap
well
related.
together.
Thank you.
Okay.
Then, two other ones that start to mold a little bit into site plan of operation, but I'll explain why, I have the one. That outdoor fires, can only be in acceptable locations within a fire ring or grills, but they need to be also clearly marked on the campground map. That's why I say that now. Because I think on the map, we'd also wanna see those kind of areas, so we can start to make a determination on the fire maybe concern that was discussed.
And if you wanna make that more strict, I'm also fine with you giving a minimum distance to any neighbor.
Well, and that part would probably
that
be during
plan of
site plan of operation. I think that gives, again, I'm looking for things that give the plan commission a starting point in processing through the site plan of operation. Does that one sound okay?
Does, yep, thank you.
Then, The only other one that I don't think is otherwise captured during our site plan of operation would be that they need to obtain adequate liability insurance for the operation of a campground and keep the insurance current during the life of the conditional use.
Terrific.
The other thing I would ask for would be a plan for their signs within the campground. That would show a posting of what our current ordinances are for noise, safety, that sort of thing. You know, like, as far as sound, you know what I'm talking about? We have like certain hours of noise, not after a certain hour of the day.
I think a better way of communicating that is handout when they register. People don't read
Absolutely.
signs. You can put all the signs up and
But campgrounds still do it. They still hand it to you when you sign in, and they have a sign posted.
And that would actually not be,
So the officer can drag the person over there and say, didn't you read this?
Yeah.
but it'd be in the email they get when they book.
It's
and
no different than a boat landing. You still put it on the boat landing, you still give them a boater safety handout when they buy a boat.
From a
Same
liability
kind of thing.
standpoint, the insurance
Exactly.
wants that there, so,
Exactly. Oh, the liability with your insurance company.
yeah, no, I have no problem with that.
Actually, one other one, because it feeds their site plan, so if nothing else, even if you don't put it as a condition, it's probably worth just having a conversation and communicating what your expectations might be for the campground map. Would be the driveways serving the campsite, are they going to be a minimum width? And then do you want some sign off from the fire chief or someone, you know, the emergency vehicles, that there's adequate turnarounds? And I only say that
He
because
already did.
I thought the fire chief signed off at 20-foot wide roadway.
Yeah, he did.
20 foot wide, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought,
And there was a minimum height as well
14
for
feet high.
clearance.
Yeah.
All of
Right.
our
Alright.
department had signed off already.
Got it, thank you, and then that gives them a clear expectation of what to bring on the site plan. That's the only reason I suggested it, and I appreciate that additional information. That's really all I had that were, again, conditional use permit specific.
I guess we go back to one question that Mark had as far as, using those smaller pads for tent camping if there's not a mobile or a home on there on wheels, a cabin on wheels, or for parking. I don't know that we addressed that concern, if in fact that should be a concern that we need to apply to this conditional use.
Well, I mean, you do have a reference to that in the list of conditions here, so I just, we weren't down that list all the
Oh,
way. so
okay.
I mean, you absolutely can talk about, you know, what kind of limits you have on tent camping.
Can you please refresh our memory what we said about tent camping so far then, please, what you have in there?
Well, it's just on the list, I don't even have a check, cause we haven't gotten there,
Oh,
but tent
okay.
camping should be prohibited unless accompanied by an RV unit, that was what was on that list.
By a RV or camping unit of some sort.
That was on the list, and if that's what you want in there.
Jerry, what did you mean by that? What was your vision for
Well-
where a tent would go?
so that we didn't have just tents popping up
You
all
didn't
over.
have a motorcycle drive up with a tent.
Yeah.
That's what you're
But-
preventing.
These I would assume the rental rates on these should be pretty high, seeing they're full-service sites. And a lot of times that'll scare away the tent campers, but I was just, again, trying to keep it looking upscale RV type park.
So that would mean on where he would like to put the tiny homes, but right now he's not going to, you would not want to see tents on those.
Correct, my opinion.
So the tent would be next to the RV spot.
Somebody comes in RV with their grandkids or kids and they want to camp out in a tent at night, they could do that.
Okay.
But other than that, just if they want to rent a site and put a tent on it, I guess, I don't know. I just was trying to, again, make it keep it looking like a upscale RV park.
Well, and most people that wanna do that are the kind that would go to a county park or, yeah.
Then the other issue Mark brought up was possibility of using those pads for parking, additional parking for trailers, extra vehicles, whatever the case might be.
Well, I think that would be covered in the first item where we get a complete campground
Does it?
map.
Okay.
And I would think if we're gonna allow them for parking, then they can't be converted eventually to campsites. You either leave them as parking or because people are gonna bring their ATVs or boats or something like that.
Well, I think that would come back if for a change in the site plan of
Right,
operation,
right.
if you decided to put the,
The question, I'm picturing, you know, if I take a unit out, I'm just gonna push that gravel essentially to make a second, you know, one unit that's twice as wide to allow the parking, you know, your boat, trailer, whatever. It wouldn't change the density. It also wouldn't decrease the gravel surface that I'm talking about. It would just
Okay.
make some units bigger. And I would be able to rent those larger pads for more, because, you know, people who bring a boat would pay $20 a night more to build parking.
Park there 20, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I think that, again, sounds like site plan, but I
Right.
just wanted to make sure that was okay with you guys before I tweak the map to show that, and then have you say when we don't like it. So,
And then you have to work on the buildings that have your other, for the site plan
Yeah,
of
that's-
operation, that they're permanent, okay.
yeah, then, yeah, I think I just need you guys to clarify the tent portion, or, you know, if, what I can bring in, if it's not an RV, you know, can I bring a camper? Can I bring a car with a rooftop tent? You know, where's the line on that?
Like a pop-up camper is what you're thinking, or something?
Yeah,
to
or
that-
like the pull behinds, you know, pop-up camper,
For the Jeeps that have their tents on top of their
That
roof.
folds
There's
out.
trucks that have those now too, where they got the
Yeah,
really
Those people
expensive
that hike and
campers,
stuff.
yeah.
with the
I think-
Airstreams that are really sweet,
I
yeah.
think all of those, in my mind, those should be allowed, but that's what I'm trying to ask and clarify before we.
RV definition covers all of those. It just does
Does it
not include.
cover a rooftop tent? I don't know if it does. I think you're trying to prohibit ground camping, you know, a tent on the ground.
No, I think if it's attached to a vehicle, I think it's covered, but I looked up that definition, I don't think I brought it with me.
I guess I don't know. So I
Did you
just
have
wanted
something?
clarification for those smaller pads.
No.
You sure? You look like you got something you wanna say.
The wheels are spinning, Tom, we see
Yeah,
'em.
I'll make a
ahead.
motion to approve the, conditional use permit with, it'll take me a minute here. We're gonna go with the 30 total number of sites, all sites to be RV sites or cabin sites. So I'm assuming that knocks out these trailers with the wheels on them for rental, and that's what I'm assuming when I'm reading this. If I'm wrong, correct me, Nick. All RV sites to be a minimum of 20 by 50 feet, with a minimum spacing between sites of 30 feet.
We didn't say that, did we?
No,
No, we
This
did
is
not
in
say.
my motion, this is in my
Oh, I'm
motion.
sorry, I'm sorry.
it's his motion.
All roads to be a hard packed gravel surface. Tent camping prohibited unless accompanied by a RV unit. Setback from the road right of way to be a minimum of 50 feet. All campfires should be an enclosed pit with a maximum diameter of 36 inches, following any other of the town's burning codes. Vegetation screening, when planted, should be a minimum of 6 feet tall when planted. We also will have quiet hours from 11 PM to 7 AM. No future alcohol license application to come from the campground. Complete campground design map showing all buffer zones and septic systems and anything else that should be on a complete site plan. Liability insurance shall be carried at all times.
They cover all Nick's additions.
So I can't read one of my chicken scratches. I think this is campfire. No alcohol. I think we covered next the complete site plan with areas.
He had a little more detail, I think.
I had some more
He
detail.
has more
I had more
detail.
detail in a few of
If you're,
those.
if you're saying that you would agree with what Nick
I-
suggested, then
Yes.
we'll let Nick do the writing.
Does
So
that
what-
does that include the fire one? Because what you read was what Jerry had, and what I read was
Yeah.
definitely different.
He added that
Yeah.
there would be a fire plan, a
Fire,
a
all the
permanent,
locations are
permanent
designated.
location plan on the site plan.
Do we need a second on this for discussion?
I just wanna make sure I have the right.
I understand, and that could be part of the discussion.
Well, yeah, we
I'll
should have
second it for
complete before
purposes
we
of
second it.
discussion.
Why don't we have Nick read back what he's got and see if that's hits you to the highlights that you've brought forward. Go ahead, Nick.
Okay, to approve the conditional use permit with the following. Filed with the town and signed by a licensed architect, engineer, or surveyor showing the campground layout, location of all sites, property lines, setbacks, structures, water supplies, private waste disposal systems, any recreation areas, parking areas, and proposed landscaping.
Yep.
And no permanent alcohol license shall be applied for or issued at the premises under the approval as a campground, and no portion of the campground shall become a bar or tavern. That outdoor fires shall only be in acceptable locations within a fire ring and grills, and shall be clearly specified on the campground map. That the owner shall obtain adequate liability insurance for the operation of campground and keep the insurance current. The limit of a total number of sites to 30. That all sites to be RV sites or cabin sites, and cabins must be on a permanent foundation. That all RV sites to be a minimum of 20 foot by 50 foot with a minimum spacing between of 30 feet. That all roads and sites must be hard surfaced, which can include compacted gravel. Tent camping prohibited unless accompanied by, wait, no, you didn't have any of that, did you?
Yes, he did.
Yes, he did.
Okay, sorry, so tent camping prohibited unless accompanied by RV unit. Setback from road right of way, 50-foot minimum. Campfires already referenced. Vegetative screening shall be installed in the setback area at a minimum height of 6 foot when planted. And then quiet hours from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m.
I'll second that.
7 a.m.
He said 11 P to 7. Originally. Is that what you just said?
Can I just make one comment to that? So our ordinance for quiet hours for noise
It's 10.
runs from 10 to 7.
I'd like to amend my motion to 10 PM instead of 11 PM.
I'll accept that for the second.
Thank you.
Okay, ask him.
Nick, is there anything that we're missing glaring?
I think that has the list that I had noted. It has Jerry's list. It does have additional items, but again, that was part of a motion in a second.
Jerry originally had 50-foot
We-
spacing between
It was
sites.
down to 30,
You hit minimum of 30, you said.
minimum 30.
Could be more.
Okay.
Trying to look at Mark's side of it.
Jason?
I'd like to see a condition that it remains open to routine, police/sheriff patrols.
Sure.
They're always in our parking lot anyway at night.
Come get us soda while you're there.
I would amend mine to include routine police, sheriff patrol in the roadway, whatever.
Yeah, some campgrounds will put control arms down, so you can't get in if you're not a guest, but that's not been something we've planned on. We planned on the cameras at this point, so it would be open, always welcome.
I'll accept the amendment as my second.
Bill?
I'd like to ask the applicant if any of those conditions that you've just heard would be deal breakers for him.
I had a couple questions just for clarification first. So the first.
Can we do that, Mr. Kidd?
Certainly.
Yeah, so my first question, again, maybe I'm just slow, but the differentiation between the RV sites and the cabin sites, if there's no cabin there, I'm not hearing anything in what we're saying that I could put a camper there. So I don't know if we should be differentiating between like an RV and a small site.
Or like a pull-behind camper you're talking
Yeah,
about?
or the Airstream, vans, any of that stuff, because
correct me if I'm wrong, anybody up here.
You did say that tent camping should be prohibited unless covered by
Yeah,
RV.
yeah, but I considered, and correct me if we're all on a different page. When I read all sites to be RV sites, I do consider a travel trailer being pulled in on a pickup truck an RV.
Then fine. So
Okay,
all-
I consider a family towing in the pull-behind camper that we probably all have with the roof that goes up and the beds that come out. I'm considering that an RV.
Okay. So I
Along
essentially-
with the ones that you drive in, an RV.
So I'd essentially have a large and a small RV site, is what you're saying, right?
Well, I guess they'd all be the same if we're requiring a 20 by 50 minimum.
Yeah, but that's my question, because right now the map doesn't show that, so I'm gonna need to make my small sites that are to the northeast, or northwest on the map, that were the luxury model home sites, those I don't think are 30 by 50 right now, or 20 by 50 right now. And so they would need to be enlarged, which would
Right.
push them, it would change where the road is and push them as right up to the buffer, essentially of the setback. I don't know if that's the solution that we wanted. So originally I thought the 20 by 50 for the RV sites was what we had listed as the RV sites.
In your sites for the column for discussion, we call them tiny
Smaller
houses.
sites, yeah.
The ones on wheels,
Yeah.
those sites were how big?
To look at
They
the
were
map.
essentially, which I don't know if we even need to address those at this moment until they tell us definitely no.
No, but I need to know what
They
I can park
originally
on.
were gonna be, per se, the luxury and then a spot for two vehicles to pull in.
Yeah.
So normally, it'd be 20 feet wide by, 25 feet deep for the pad parking itself, and then in front of that, per se, would be the cabin. So it wasn't designed deeper than that,
I
just
think what we're asking for is
like
20
driveway parking.
20 by 50 sites with 30 feet between them, some of the small sites will have to be enlarged or moved so that they fit that criteria.
Lori?
Yes, I have two questions. First of all, Mr. Chair, I think you have 2 seconds. Bill seconded and then Jerry did. I thought you did. I heard you say second.
I wasn't acknowledged, so.
Oh, I'm sorry, I have Tom and Jerry for the,
Time and-
yeah, sorry, play on words.
The second question I have is for Nick. Or could you clarify for me, or can you clarify for me, Mark? I thought we were originally talking like 43 to 45. Is 30 feet between sites gonna be
I think if we're
what,
doing
you're
a
saying
mid-
30 feet?
My motion was with a minimum spacing of 30 feet, because I thought there was some discussion here before that 50 feet in some of the areas was pushing it
Yeah.
too far to the
So you have-
outskirts of the property, so we could theoretically get these a little bit more off of the property lines if we allowed a little bit smaller spacing between the sites and give the more of a buffer to the adjoining property.
No, I understand where you were going with it. I think my concern again is you're forcing the smaller sites that I had originally earmarked to get bigger, and that's going to push them closer to the setbacks than they already would have been, and you're also increasing the setback from what we had drawn it. So you're shrinking the space that I can put everything. And I think it's going to push I think it's gonna end up pushing the setback, or the septic more towards the outside of the property, which isn't gonna be ideal if we're shrinking everything into the center more. I understand the purpose, but I don't think it's going to,
Well, we're trying to reduce the density, which is what all the neighbors were concerned about.
well, and we're doing that by saying 30 units, but
Yeah,
if
but
you're
you're
gonna
only taking away
shoehorn it-
5 little ones, but, when you follow these guidelines, you may not be able to get 30, maybe it's only 28, but
Well, that's
at least
my
it'll be spaced
point
out.
is, if you're saying that I can do 30, but you're only gonna give me space for 18 after I put the setbacks and put everything there, you're making it prohibitive, so.
Mr. Chair, might it be possible that we would consider not doing the limit on spacing and allow, Mark to work with the idea that our attorney suggested with a map, once he goes to the county and understands how the septic's gonna work out with Garrison, and then work with the spacing, with the site plan of operation, and the 30 sites that we allowed him?
It's not up to me, so open for discussion.
It seems to me that it would make more sense, because you're giving him footage and sizes and everything, but what really is gonna depend is what the county says about where, and Garrison is very good. Many of us have used him for our homes. He's gonna work with the county and put the best placement for the septic system. That's really where the placement of all these spots are gonna go. So it seems before we start dictating the spacing between the spots, we've given them a limit. The spacing of the septic is what's really gonna dictate where everything can be placed and the spacing between them. So Nick, maybe with the map you suggested would better, or am I now not even?
Sure, well, one thing that I would just note is doing it here puts that sets, you know, the strict standards that then would need to come back on the campground map. Not putting it there, you may get something totally different, and you're gonna have to have that conversation with that campground map and site plan of operation as to maybe that spacing. So it isn't the last time you'd see it if you didn't put it on there, but just understand that, like, you don't know what you're gonna expect until they work through those pieces and maybe have some reasons for the spacing that they would propose. You know, again, if you do it here today, it's giving them the standards that we expect, and they're gonna need to work within them. If we leave it off, they're gonna work through that and then come back, and that still can be tweaked by you. But
If he can't meet, just say, I leave my motion the same, and we leave the 30 feet. And he realizes after his septic system and where the, Adams County is gonna run power and water and all that, there's something that's not right. We can then still review this at the site plan and plan of operation and okay it if something is not 30 feet between the sites. Or am I wrong at that point?
you can, again, you'll engage in a dialogue with them on why they proposed what they did, and you know, and maybe that can be adjusted. You know,
But this is just giving him some guidelines on how he should set up his campground.
This would set the standard if you set it at 50. If you set it at 30 or 50, then they're absolutely gonna have to work within that standard if they're complying with this conditional use. If you take that away, then they're coming back with a campground map, spacing it as they deem, you know, that they can do, right? And then you're able to discuss it still.
I have a question to you.
Yes.
I think what you were saying is that you have more latitude if we don't give you the 30 foot minimum right now, so that you can keep it further from the adjoining properties. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I'd like
from
to
you?
have the higher density of units, of pads potentially closer to my parking lot, so that I have more room to spread out around the outside, you know, as the current map had been drawn.
So then by giving you that latitude, you're gonna try to keep it away from,
That would be the goal, yeah,
Yeah.
to minimize that outward facing density.
personally, I would say that maybe we should drop to 30, give him the latitude to do that.
You can always require it later, you know.
I would totally agree with that. I want to see the layout prior to tying his hands.
Have to amend that then?
You'd have to amend it.
We're just having a discussion right now.
Well, if you were taking it out, it would take an
Right.
amendment, I think.
You
that was
agree
what-
with that?
I would agree with that.
Dan, did you have something you had to say?
Well,
Oh,
can I make another suggestion?
Certainly you can.
Because it was, I think there was a very valid point brought up on what's the understanding of an RV site. So, I went, because I think that's crucially important. So I went into the ordinance, and I'm not sure that we have a great definition, but where there is a good definition is in state statute under vehicles. There is a definition for motorhome. There's a definition for recreational vehicle. I can read those definitions, and if those sound like what you understood them to be, I might recommend that we include exactly what those that the reference to that, so there's no question that these are what we expect to see on those sites, you know, as far as what we'll allow. So with that, I mean, I think that would be helpful. I suspect if
Oh,
we have
certainly.
some
No, I think it'd be
clearer
helpful.
definition on what exactly that is, so there's no question going
Yep.
forward.
And then I'll have a follow-up question about the pad size after you're done, I think.
Okay, so reserve the pad size question.
Yep.
Let me read over the, so this would be in, chapter 340.01, under definitions for vehicles and statute. We'll start with, motor home. Motor home is a motor vehicle designed to be operated upon a highway for use as a temporary or recreational dwelling and having the same internal characteristics and equipment as a mobile home. Is that your understanding of a motor home? Okay. Recreational vehicle. Recreational vehicle means a vehicle that is designed to be towed upon a highway by a motor vehicle that is equipped and used or intended to be used primarily for temporary or recreational human habitation, that has walls of rigid construction and does not exceed 45 feet in length.
Can you read that one more time, please?
Recreational vehicle means a vehicle that is designed to be towed upon a highway by a motor vehicle that is equipped and used or intended to be used primarily for temporary or recreational human habitation, that has walls of rigid construction and does not exceed 45 feet in length.
So would a Chevy Silverado with a thing in the back not qualify as a,
That was my question. The pop-up tents don't fit that definition, you know,
well, those would be,
Now, you're talking about the truck campers that fit in the
Correct.
bed of the truck.
it's not towed.
Yeah, so that's not gonna
But if
fit
it-
motor
and if
vehicle.
I don't think he's got to that point of his research yet.
Well, so you'd have to maybe add that one just specifically, but I think otherwise these two definitions fit what was discussed and make a little bit clearer standard.
But a pop-up
But
camper
Marcus-
doesn't fit, because it
Tent
doesn't have
camper.
rigid sides. It's got soft sides.
Except when it's being towed,
Sure, okay.
so
I'm just,
maybe that covers it, I don't
you
know.
know,
Well, a tent camper has rigid sides at the bottom. It's
Right.
soft on the top, so it's an RV.
I think we're
Don't
kinda
tell
getting
tent
way
camper.
away from the
Yes, we
camping,
are.
and
I
I'm
mean,
not
there's
the
a camp-
smart-
there's
I'm not
camping-
the smartest, but I know, I mean, basically, we just need clarification. Yes, with a pull-out tent that's set up.
Yeah.
Most people recognize a camper, pop-ups, bedded truck campers, Class A's, Class C's, you know, I guess our only question is, can we have someone come up and put a tent up
on the ground.
on the ground?
So camping trailer covers some of what there's also a definition for that. So maybe you do motor home, recreational vehicle, camping trailer, and pop-up tent. I mean, and again, then you have that restriction for RV sites and tents, right?
Yeah.
So. Does that sound okay? I wanna make sure that that 5 years from now, there's not a question on what that meant.
Or what was allowed.
Well, because somebody says what's allowed, you're gonna look at if there's any guidance in our conditions. And if we say, well, it's to be RV sites or cabin sites, if that's what we have, then what's the definition of RV? Well, maybe the minutes say it and maybe they don't.
My one question then, where, if these pictures that he included in here in the beginning, are those a tiny home or are those an RV? Because what my motion was trying to get across is we're gonna have RV sites or we're gonna have cabins. Because nobody could ever answer this trailer with tires that stays permanently. So are those considered RVs, or are those considered tiny homes and those are not allowed?
What the issue is not whether they're allowed, it's that whether their operation is to have those located, you know, quote unquote permanently and have transients renting it, which maybe you should put in the condition that that's not allowed, right? That needs to be from cabins, if that's what you're.
That is where I was going with it, so that the cabins could be fully inspected and meet all the short-term rental criteria.
So,
Yeah, because I get the impression that based on what you've submitted to us since the last meeting and this meeting, that was really a big part of what your operation was gonna be.
Well, it
correct?
was, you know, but I think if I have to be flexible with it, you know, I will try.
And they don't look bad, so what, and they're not bad units, so if it's a matter of,
I feel like if it got approved by, you know, the health department and
and they
was-
ran as short-term rentals, and
I
they're
think
part,
they're considered RVs, you know.
it's a terminology that's
Right.
getting people hung up.
They're considered RVs, and I think, I don't know if this needs to specify that detail, because I wouldn't be able to rent an RV if it doesn't get approved by the health department.
Could we just add the condition that all rental units must meet this short-term rental criteria that the town has established?
So that takes out of one-night stays, correct?
That works.
You can't have one-night stays.
And
I don't
there's,
know that you wanna
the other
set that
conditions then for a
criteria.
7-night rental.
You don't wanna say,
I'm not saying
are
that
correct.
works, I don't know that
Absolutely
works with
correct.
their plan of operation.
It doesn't.
Well, maybe not, but
You know, again, I think the only thing I'm trying to put in as a condition would be, you know, if that's what Tom is wanting to have it, you know, clear in there is that renting shall only be from cabins, you know, on site. And that you have already, cabins must be on a permanent foundation.
right. But the cabin would meet the normal short-term rental criteria, would it not?
Well, would have to operate it as a short-term
Right,
rental.
that's what I'm saying.
But what is the restriction on a short-term rental for,
UDC, I think, is what it is, because it requires a building inspection.
well, I mean, the restriction as far as,
I think that's in
Timeframes.
residential, yeah, I think that's in residential districts.
so not in the
Yeah,
B1?
the only reason that wording bootstrapped it was because it said you had to meet all the criteria. Well, all the criteria of short-term rentals is that.
Okay,
But otherwise, so for example, again, we have cabins or those types of structures that are renting in this town already on business owned, and they have to meet UDC requirements, but they also, because of their B1, can rent for shorter.
okay,
So,
so that would still fit within the parameters of what he would like?
yeah, I probably wouldn't, again, you know, I don't call it bootstrap like it was intentional, but I wouldn't pull in that as criteria if there isn't an intention to substantially change what their operational plan is that they've communicated so far.
All right, we have a motion on the floor by, I'm sorry, go ahead. More discussion?
Well, I'm a little confused with I think there's 7 of your, can I just call them tiny home
Call 'em what you
areas?
want.
8 on the north part. north-
Outside the road, outside the driveway.
Right. Now, if these are all to be 20 by 50, which is what we're saying, 20 by 50 RV
A minimum.
minimum, then I don't think you're gonna be able to get anything up there because we're having a 50-foot setback.
Correct, we just.
And
made
then
a law
another,
that says that.
yeah, I don't think,
That's,
is that viable? Are you gonna be able to do anything up there with this criteria that they would be placing on the?
Not there. I mean, we're seeing, that's what we already said, you know, oh, joke's on you, we might have approved 30, but based on the spacing, you're gonna only be able to get 12. You know, by the time we put all these criteria in. So it's gonna shift a lot of the plan.
But I think we're gonna give you the latitude on the.
Well, on the spacing wise, but not on the length of a path right now. So as we were just reading the definitions of an RV, you could have a 10-foot pull behind camper, or whatever length, and it doesn't need a full 50 feet. So I would think if we're using these definitions, we should shorten and say the minimum pad is, 20 by 25. That would allow, I think, what I'm hoping to do to stay.
Because you would not be able to utilize that space on the north side at all.
We'd end up parallel parking.
Yeah.
Well, you angle park,
I'll buy
see
a
that?
ticket to watch
Yeah.
that.
you angle
I mean,
park
that's the
them, you
problem.
can still have quite a few sites, but angle park them at 30 or 45
I
degrees.
don't know how, without getting out my ruler, I don't know how much I could angle a spot in up there that was 50 feet long and still had a 50-foot setback with what you're asking for right now.
May I ask?
Certainly, go ahead,
Mr.
Bill.
Wiesinger, a question. Why the 20 by 50 for a small pull-behind camper unit?
Just a standard size for regardless of what, so they can put any size camper that comes in the
Right.
The driveway
It would
there.
allow for anything, but it does eliminate spaces. Is that the reason for the criteria?
Yeah,
Okay.
minimize the number of spaces, basically.
That's all I
30 was higher than I wanted, but I'm trying to also satisfy the neighbors. I mean, that was one of the big concerns, is the density.
So what I would like to see it is just to have that pad size changed to 20 by 25, and then I can have some larger ones and some smaller ones, because that would be the minimum pad size.
Well, then I have a question then. A lot of the pull-behind campers could be 25 to 30 feet long, and then if you include the length of the vehicle, they're gonna be outside the perimeters of your pad. Now, would the truck be able to park somewhere else and just the camper stays on the site?
Or if it's 20 feet wide, they'd be able to potentially park next to it.
Okay, I'm just saying that, but they don't have to stay attached to be able to fit your parameters for the space.
I think you could drop your camper, park, parallel park next to it, or, just park next to it, and the 20-foot wide pad.
Yeah, because I think a lot of us might be envisioning the whole,
Yeah.
the truck and the trailer combined
Even
would
with the-
fit that length. Lori?
May I?
Yeah.
Well, we can vote my motion down and put another motion on the floor too.
Well, I think we could just amend it, maybe, perhaps.
Then can I ask one last question about the motion as it is right now? You had asked for the quiet hours, and I know that, some of the restaurants, ours included, will sometimes go past 10 PM for concerts. Is it reasonable to keep the quiet hours in the campground the same as the quiet hours at the business?
I only amended mine because of the town ordinance that's on the books with the town of Rome right now. That said quiet hours are from 10 to 7. I did originally have the 11. I amended it to meet the ordinance that's in the town of Rome's book. Now, your business, the lure, I don't know what, with the concerts, I don't know what happens there. I just wanted my motion to match what is typed and numbered in the books, and Nick brought that to my attention. And that's the only reason I pushed it back by the hour to match the ordinance that's on the book. It's hard for us to give you a time that's outside of the ordinance that we're supposed to be looking at to approve this stuff.
And honestly, I don't know if it matters.
I think what it does is it forces them, if they want to party after 10 o'clock, to go to your bar.
Right, and that's
So
why I don't think
you
it
should
matters.
accept it.
But I'm not gonna argue that one.
Well, you can still party outside, you just gotta turn the radio down a little
Well,
bit,
you just have
keep
to
your
be quiet.
voices down. Okay.
I think we should, modify it to a 20 by 25 foot pad.
Is there, can I just ask a question though, based on, was there a reason why you felt the need to gravel all of these pads for the smaller campsites, or make them all 20 by 50, or is that just because that's the motion that was put out there? Or because that was what was on the drawing, or that's because that's what the current zoning administrator told you to do?
You're asking a great question. The large sites, the RV sites, we definitely want to have the hard compacted
In
gravel.
case you get like a Class A motorhome
Right,
in there
it's
that
got the
they're
weight
on,
that we
right,
don't
and
want.
they, yeah.
The other ones, really, it's more just because if we put in the right padded or compacted gravel right off the bat, we're not gonna get the ruts, we're not gonna get, a mess from rain washing out, tire tracks and muddy tracks.
Well, I'm just thinking, cause like the county campground sites, they're not all gravel, and I don't know
Correct.
if they might say something that they don't want all that gravel there because of the washout or the rain, or they might, I was just curious why you did have them all
I think it's
gravelled or
because
hard surface too, but
I thought it would be more likely to be approved, it's gonna look nicer than the.
yeah, I'm not debating that with you, I was just curious why they were all But to go back and forth inside, you don't know, you might get all Class A motorhomes in there, you might get all tent camp, who knows what you're gonna get, so to sit here and debate sizes.
Well, if I change
I
the
think
pad
it's gonna,
size,
you know, we'll do them all one size and you're gonna get all big ones, small ones, who knows, that's why to me it's just,
I think that's why
Who
we
knows
should
what
give
you're gonna
him,
get?
I think we should give him the latitude.
Yes.
We've got
yes.
we have a number on the, or we have a limit to what you can do. Give you the latitude to sort that out. Again, getting the biggest distance from your neighbors
Yep.
and compacting it as best you can.
yeah, and you're just giving me my guide rails right now, then I can
Exactly.
tweak the map and.
Would you guys agree to that?
30 units, you
I
know,
would
he's gotta
agree.
get a septic system in there.
And I
he's
would
gotta-
agree with his thinking, let's pull everything as much as possible, more a tight campground in the middle instead of pushing stuff to the outside.
Yeah.
Whatever you can shrink
Middle.
into the
Give
middle.
him the latitude to do that.
Middle or towards the edge on my business
Right.
side.
Yeah.
It's kinda like pads to be subject to size dependent. And again, like just me, I mean, a lot of this has been, you know, designed like it is, obviously all subject to change. Cause we may get in there, and we've talked about this, we may get, by the time we clear what we thought was gonna be good enough for us, like we've talked before, is that we might have to end up, you know, sizing down to 30 anyway, or 28, because our main goal was our residents. So if this tree line didn't work by the time we got our driveway in, it'd be like, okay, well, now it's not what we thought, because everything on paper is never right, as much as we all want to believe so. I mean, everything's subject, just like, you know, the pads. We just, again, like you said, it's a little bit of leeway on, not every pad needs to be huge.
Right. Well, I tell you what, it's in your best interest because these people are your customers. You gotta deal with them day to day. You're gonna do it right. in my
Right,
opinion.
yeah, I mean,
And we'll
again,
keep
we've
doing it right.
designed this for, believe it or not, the neighbors. We could have been, you know, as he stated in the last meeting, state law for this size of acreage, we could have done 60. And we could have cleared everything out and just said, well, that's, you know, the law says we can have 60, so we're going 60, and we're
Right.
gonna have these meetings every 3 weeks and go crazy at each other, and we've, you know, I think we've compromised quite a bit. And even with the layout along our neighbors, you know, we made it to be subject to change. And, you know, the back ones, I mean, we own the property across the street from it too. So we took that into consideration regarding if we, you know, he decides 10 years from now to build a home over there, that it's not hurting, you know, us also. So I just wanted to point out, we've little bit of leeway, and everything has been designed around these guys, around our patrons and our neighbors.
We'll make an amendment or whatever.
Yeah, I guess I would ask then that, yeah, that the motion and the second be amended to include the leeway that you're going to allow the applicant to do.
I have 20 by 25. Is that, so you want it all the way out? You just want the site minimum?
Well, I'm just,
Gone?
you know, I'm just thinking that 25, some of the people are pulling behind campers, you know, could be 30 feet, you
That's
know.
why it's the minimum. But I
Or
totally-
long, I don't know, if their
It's a-
pull behinds are longer
It's a
than that?
minimum for the design, minimum.
Okay,
So
I
the
would say
beauty
this
of,
was-
the beauty of the software that I'm gonna do, you know, same as if you go on to a hotel website and you wanna rent a room and you filter by king bed,
Right.
queen bed, whatever, they can filter and say, I need 30 feet, you know, to get my pull behind in. It's only gonna show them spots that are 30 plus feet.
understand.
So it behooves me to give them more room, but also it doesn't limit me if I want some smaller ones, it's smaller campers.
Sure, okay.
So you list it how you want. but-
So then will the motion maker and the second then take into consideration or accept the additional amendment?
Yes.
As far as the pad size of 20 by 25
Minimum.
minimum for the smaller area up there on the northwest?
Was that only a portion of it, or, I mean, that's getting,
I think it's saying the minimum for all potentially up to 30 pads would be 25. And
No.
have some that are bigger and some that are, that's
Now, we allow you the latitude so that you can shrink it. I think that's what we talked about, bring it all inward and towards you.
that would be the idea.
Well, I
I
think,
don't agree with it.
is that, Jerry, is that taking away from your 20 by 50?
Well, yeah, it's gonna, it can increase the density then.
No, because
No,
we got
I
a
get
limit on it.
maximum
Yeah.
of 30.
Yeah, we got a max of 30.
Majority will be that 20 by, 50, but we need leeway to, we go over here and it's smaller, then we can maximize that smaller area without protruding into our neighbors. Just things are gonna get moved around more you do construction, just like anything else. We just want maximum of at least 50, but a minimum of, some smaller ones.
And again, we do revisit this again if we talk, right?
You will see it again at the site plan of operations.
Whatever they want.
When we see it again, then, is
Did you
there,
amend your
are we able
motion?
to then amend if need be? Or adjust the site plan of
You would have to
operation?
do an amendment to the conditional use permit conditions if you were going to do that.
Okay.
Or you are reviewing their campground map within the,
Right,
because their campground map is going to meet the conditions
set forth?
you all put
Right.
in. And then there's probably a conversation about location and site plan, and there may be some, maybe they come and they just stack them all in the middle, right, and there's a density concern. I mean, that's part of your site plan of operation discussion.
Okay,
I'll accept amendment on my second, but I'm not happy about it, but I will just to get this thing done.
okay,
We've
so
got
then we
too many
have
hours invested already.
a motion by Tom, seconded by Jerry to set forth the conditions that Nick has written on this piece of paper.
For transparency, do you want me to read them again?
If you
But
would,
I-
if,
We can take
just
a-
so that everybody's clear, please, Lori?
I'd just like to make one more, well, I think it would have been easier if we had just gone with the list that Nick originally had and waited for everything else until we got to our next meeting, and this is just a lot more convoluted than it should have been, sadly, but if we would have gone with the map, but I just wanted to make that comment, but I would like to call the question, please, now, and please read that list.
Thank you. The motion was made and seconded to approve the conditional use permit with the following conditions. First, that a complete campground map must be completed for the entire parcel, filed with the town and signed by a licensed architect, engineer, or surveyor, showing the campground layout, location of all sites, property lines, setbacks, structures, water supplies, private waste disposal systems, recreation areas, parking areas, and proposed landscaping. That no permanent alcohol license shall be applied for or issued for the premises under the approval as a campground, and no portion of the campground shall become a bar or tap room. That outdoor fires shall only be in acceptable locations within a fire ring and grills, and shall be clearly specified on the campground map. That the owner shall obtain adequate liability insurance for the operation of campground, and keep the insurance current during the life of the conditional use. That the number of total sites is limited to 30. That all sites to be motorhome, recreational vehicle, and camping trailer sites or cabin sites, those terms as defined in Wisconsin Statute 340.01. All of those sites to be a minimum of 20 by 25 feet. All roads and sites must be hard surfaced, which can include compacted gravel. That tent camping is prohibited unless accompanied by a motorhome, recreational vehicle, or camping trailer. That the setback from the road right-of-way shall be 50 feet minimum. That vegetation screening shall be installed at the setback area at a minimum height of 6 feet when planted. That quiet hours be from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. That the campground remain open to police and sheriff patrol. And lastly, that renting shall only be from cabins.
Then, let's, the motion and a second with those conditions, we'll take a roll call vote. Jerry?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
I'll vote yes. Diana?
No.
Lori?
No.
Bill?
Yes.
Motion's approved, or conditional use permits approved. Thank you, everyone, and we'll declare the meeting adjourned at 5:00 PM.